The Lord of the Hidden Ring 3. The Curse of the Ring. Prologue. For centuries, the kingdoms of Lydia and Cimmeria had lived under the shadows of fate and unseen powers. Their land bore the scars of war, and their rivers, plains, and forests hid secrets that ordinary men could not understand. In the heart of these lands lay the hidden ring, a relic of giants from long ago. The keeper of a power so great that no mortal could master it without paying a price. It is said that the ring was not just an object of power, but a bridge between worlds, between men and the spirits of giants, between pure light and the shadows that smoldered in the depths. Whoever wore it could become invisible, could penetrate hearts and hidden chambers, but this power did not come without a curse. The giant from whom it had been torn the ring in the tomb had placed an ancient spell upon it. The firstborn of the bearer's lineage would be threatened by its spirit until the ring was returned to its sacred place. Years had passed, and Gyges, king of Lydia, had worn the ring with boldness and ambition, saving his kingdom, defeating the sorcerer Morgath, and bringing temporary peace. But the curse was never completely extinguished. Every choice, every step towards love or power was watched by the giant shadows. His child, Alyattes, carried hope and risk in his blood, and his destiny was tied to the fate of the ring, to the light of the kingdoms, and to the shadows that lurked in the depths. Gyges and Zarephina will face an impossible choice, to keep the throne and power, or to sacrifice everything for their son, so that the curse will not touch its prey. The ties of blood, love, loyalty, and betrayal will intertwine, and the shadows of the past will come out of silence to demand an accounting. The curse of the ring begins here. In a world where every decision has a price, every heart carries longing and fear, and the legend of the giant will never stop. Every step of the hero is overshadowed by the past, every victory brings a hidden shadow, and every love is tested by forces that can only be mastered with courage, sacrifice, and wisdom. Chapter 1. The Destiny of Gyges. At the dawn of a new era, as the sun spread its rays over the white walls of Sardis, King Gyges stood alone in the throne room, gazing longingly at the weather-blackened shield that hung on the wall. On its surface were still visible traces of blood, deep scratches and scars of fire, the signs of the battles that had given him glory and the throne. Every time his gaze fell on that shield, memories rushed in with force. Like torrents impossible to stem, and the silence of the hall, Gyges felt the weight of the past pressing down on his shoulders. The words of the people, the songs of the bards, the cheers of the crowd could not cover the voices of those who fell for him, nor the cry of the bravest of the 7 chosen, 𝕬𝖎𝖓𝖌. The great battle to save Lydia had been written with fire and blood in history. The wizard Morgath, then at the peak of his power, had brought a dark army across the fields of Lydia, made up of Cimmerian warriors, mercenaries from the Aegean islands, and servants of the shadows, created by death charms. Sardis was surrounded, and the people looked at the walls with broken hearts, knowing that the end was approaching. Then Gyges, with a hidden ring shining on his finger, he called around him the 7 chosen ones, men of faith, wisdom, and bravery. Among them was 𝕬𝖎𝖓𝖌, the fiercest of warriors, with eyes like coals and arms as strong as iron. Together, they left the city and set off on the bloody plains of the Hydaspes. Gyges remembered every moment of that battle. The heavy breathing under his helmet, the cries of the people, the blows of sword and shield, the smell of smoke and burning flesh. He remembered how he made himself invisible with the power of the ring and struck from the shadows, giving courage to his soldiers, who believed that the gods had come down to fight for Lydia. He remembered how 𝕬𝖎𝖓𝖌 broke through the enemy ranks like a wild bull, shouting Lydia's name every time he struck. The wizard Morgath, standing on a hill, had summoned the shadows to descend. Over the plain of fight, a black, dense wave like pitch, it had spread among the soldiers, stifling the light of day. In that darkness, a single cry was heard, short and terrible. Gyges. It was the voice of 𝕬𝖎𝖓𝖌. When the mist cleared, his body lay pierced by an enchanted spear, and blood flowed freely on the grass. Gyges had run to him, but it was too late. "King, don't forget, Lydia lives through us." These were the last words of the brave man. Gyges closed his eyes, with tears burning in his soul, and swore that his death would not be in vain. That oath gave him strength. With unbridled rage, the Lydian king raised his sword and struck like lightning. The sorcerer's army was pushed back, and Gyges' men, inspired by Calion's sacrifice, fought fiercely. When the sun rose again, the fields were blood-red, but the Lydian flag still waved. The kingdom's salvation had been paid dearly. Of the 7 chosen, 6 had survived, but their hearts were torn. 𝕬𝖓𝖓 was no more, and his memory burned their souls. Gyges had ordered his body to be brought to Sardis and buried in a hero's tomb at the foot of the walls, so that the people never forget who had given his life for Lydia. Since then, every year, when the sun fell on the city walls, Gyges went there and laid a laurel wreath on the cold stone. But fate was cruel. While the people glorified him as a savior, his conscience was weighed down by an infinite weight. He knew that salvation had come through the power of the ring, through that cursed object torn from the giant's tomb, knew that, although Lydia lived, a fire had been lit in his soul that could not be extinguished, the desire for power and the secret of guilt. That is why, in the throne room, looking at the hanging shield, Gyges felt more than just pride. He felt the pain of loss, the burden of oaths, and the threat of the shadows that still followed him. The memories were sharpening. He saw in his mind the face of Morgath, with his red eyes and smile venomous, remembered the moment when, after the battle, he spared 𝕬𝖓𝖓𝖌, the Cimmerian king, Zarephina's father, as a gesture of mercy, but also of calculation, and he remembered Zarephina's gaze, full of tears and hidden love, when they met in secret. Gyges' destiny had not only been that of a warrior king, it had been that of a man caught between light and shadow, between duty and desire. That morning, Gyges left the throne room and climbed the walls of Sardis. The wind lifted his cloak, and the sun illuminated his face, and the distance, the fields of Lydia shone green, a sign of peace regained. But in his heart he knew that the silence was only a respite. The wizard Morgath still lived. The shadows still lurked, and the curse of the ring, even if it had been hidden deep in the giant's tomb, still bound him to the past. 𝕬𝖓𝖓𝖌, he whispered, looking at the hero's tomb in the valley, I swore to you that Lydia would live through us. But how long can I bear this burden? No one answered him, only the wind brought an echo like a distant whisper, like the voice of the fallen. Thus began Gyges' new story, not as a conquering king, but as a man haunted by memories, as the master of a destiny that, no matter how much he tried to change it, remained bound to the curse of the hidden ring. Chapter 2. Forbidden Love. After the fields of Lydia were liberated and the shouts of victory still echoed in the hot air of Sardis, King Gyges felt that his heart, although crowned with glory, remained thirsty for something deeper. On a quiet night, when the full moon poured its silver light over the palace walls, his eyes turned to Cimmeria, the neighboring kingdom, where Princess Zarephina spent her time with her father. Their love was born in secret, in the shadow of rare meetings, when fate and circumstances had brought them together. Zarephina was not only beautiful, with hair like golden silk and eyes sparkling like 2 precious stones, but also brave and wise, qualities that made her Gyges' equal not only in spirit but also in mind. That night Gyges, wearing the black cloak with the invisibility cloak and the ring hidden on his finger, he slipped out of his palace and crossed the moonlit plains. His steps were light, but his heart was beating wildly. Every moment brought him closer to the secret he had carefully hidden. The desire to be close to Zarephina, even if this was forbidden. Arriving in the garden of the Cimmerian palace, Gyges hid behind a marble wall and looked at the princess's silhouette. She seemed like a goddess of the night, leaning over the small fountain, watching the reflection of the stars in the water. Gyges' eyes filled with a warmth that no military victory could have brought, and those moments, time seemed to slow down. Not even the wind blew, not even a leaf rustled. It was just him and her, bound by a feeling that defied the rules and conventions of the kingdom. Zarephina felt his presence. Although she could not see him, her heart recognized him. Every beat told her that he was there. With graceful steps, she approached the place where Gyges was hiding, not knowing that he could be invisible. Their desire to the closeness was so strong that the shadows of the night seemed to bring their souls closer. That moment, Gyges revealed himself, showing her his entire being. "Zarephina," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "Gyges," she murmured, trembling too, aware that every second could be discovered. They approached, and their hands met with a delicacy that contrasted with the power and cruelty of the battles on the fields of Lydia. That moment, nothing mattered, neither crowns, nor kingdoms, nor oaths made. There was only their love, forbidden and pure, immersed in the mystery of the night. But their love had shadows. Queen Pyrrhusane, beautiful and proud, but cautious and intelligent, suspected something, although she seemed to be silent. Her eyes followed Gyges' every gesture. She noticed how his gaze sometimes strayed to the roads leading to Cimmeria, how he was lost in thought, and how his heart leaped when Zarephina's name appeared in the whispers of the courtiers. "What is my king hiding?" Pyrrhusane whispered to herself, looking at the window through which the moonlight fell on the marble. "There is something that is not being told to me, but I still have no proof." She subtly understood that she could not intervene without risking losing him or starting a scandal that would shake Lydia. Therefore, she chose to observe and wait, to mask her suspicions in smiles and chosen words, like a true queen. Meanwhile, Gyges and Zarephina continued their secret meetings. They walked through hidden gardens, discussing their dreams and the peace that could come after the wars. But every gesture and every touch was charged with the tension of a forbidden love. Gyges knew that any wrong step could cause a conflict between the Lydians and the Cimmerians, and that he would be accused of betrayal by his own queen. "Gyges," asked Zarephina one evening, looking at the stars, "if the world found out, what would we do?" "Then," he replied, hugging her to his chest, "I would risk everything for you. But until then, let us enjoy these moments, because they give us the strength to fight and protect what we love." But their love was not without fear. One day, when Gyges left for Sardis to oversee the preparations for peace and reconstruction, Zarephina felt a cold shiver. She suspected that Pyrrhusane was observing more than she thought, and that the shadows of the past would follow their every step. The same time, Pyrrhusane sent couriers to learn more about the movements of the Cimmerian princess and the king. She did not want to cause a scandal, but the desire to protect the throne of Lydia and to understand the mystery that weighed on her heart was stronger than any fear. Gyges, feeling the tension, made delicate decisions. He kept the ring hidden and used it only to be close to Zarephina without being seen. Each visit was a challenge. To keep his presence hidden, to ensure Lydia's protection, and not to give Queen Pyrrhusane the opportunity to find out the truth. One night, when the wind brought the scent of flowers from the Cimmerian garden, Zarephina asked him with a trembling voice, "Gyges, are you afraid of what will come next?" "Yes," he admitted, looking into her eyes in which the moon was reflected. "But my fear is not for me. It is for you and for the people. Every step we take together can bring good or bad. But nothing will change what I feel." And then, in a gesture full of courage and passion, they united, swearing to protect their love despite the dangers and shadows that lurked from all corners of the kingdoms. However, Pyrrhusane did not sleep. One morning, when Gyges had not yet returned to Sardis, the queen noticed small signs, a few golden hairs found in the garden, strange footsteps through the palace courtyards, and glances that seemed to be looking for her king. Subtly, she began to follow Gyges' every gesture, every meeting and every journey, knowing that the truth would come out. This tension between personal desire and royal responsibility made the forbidden love between Gyges and Zarephina both more intense, but also more dangerous. Every moment spent together was a victory over fate, but every separation was a reminder of the limits imposed by crowns and kingdoms. The same time, Zarephina felt the weight of guilt. She knew that her connection with Gyges could be interpreted as betrayal of her father, the Cimmerian king, and that any wrong step could bring war between the kingdoms. But their love was stronger than fear, stronger than any political obligation. Gyges, looking into her eyes filled with desire and fear, knew that every decision he would make in the future would be marked by this forbidden love. It was a path strewn with shadows, but also with light, a path that would one day lead him to sacrifices that would change the fate of Lydia, Cimmeria, and his own soul, and so, in the silence of the Cimmerian nights, under the moonlight and under the watchful gaze of Queen Pyrrhusane, the forbidden love between Gyges and Zarephina continued to grow, like a flame that could not be extinguished, preparing them both for the trials that lay ahead and for the curse of the hidden ring that still lurked in the depths of the forest. Shadows. Chapter 3. The Birth of the Curse. The sun had risen for the 7th time over the Cimmerian palace, but its light did not bring peace to the soul of Princess Zarephina. For several days she had felt a state of restlessness, a mixture of joy and fear, which tightened her chest and made her heart tremble with every beat. She did not know how to tell Gyges, the king of Lydia and the master of her heart, that she was carrying in her womb the beginning of a new life, a child who would change their destiny forever. Gyges, meanwhile, fulfilled his duties as king of Lydia with a heart full of love and guilt. After saving Lydia and after he had been recognized by the people as a hero, the king experienced moments of peace only around Zarephina. Each meeting with her was a mixture of longing and fear. Longing for closeness, fear of the consequences of their forbidden love. But in that morning, when Gyges stepped into the garden of the Cimmerian palace, Zarephina was waiting for him with a smile that betrayed joy and fear at the same time. Her golden hair shone in the sunlight, and her eyes sparkled with a light that seemed to tell him more than words could convey. "Gyges," she said slowly, her voice trembling but firm, "I have something to tell you." The king approached and took her hands in his, feeling every fiber of his body tremble with emotion. "Zarephina, don't be afraid. Whatever you have to tell me, we will face together." "Gyges, I am pregnant," she said with a mixture of fear and joy. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Gyges could not say anything. His heart thumped violently, and his mind was engulfed by waves of contradictory emotions. Joy mixed with fear, fear of responsibility, fear of the kingdom's reactions, but especially fear of the curse of the ring that still lurks from the shadows of the past. "A child," Gyges murmured, his eyes filled with tears. "Our life continues through him." Zarephina looked at him, feeling her heart leap with relief. But deep down in her soul there was also a fear that their forbidden love could bring danger. Carrying a child of Gyges in her womb, a child with royal Cimmerian and Lydian blood, could change the balance of the kingdoms and could trigger the revenge of those who envied their power. Gyges hugged her and felt fear mingle with responsibility, and that embrace. He understood that his destiny had changed forever. Was no longer just the king of Lydia. He was the father of a new life, the guardian of a future that the shadows of the past would try to overshadow. "We will protect the child," he whispered. "No one and nothing will touch him. Neither the curse of the ring, nor the sorcerer Morgath. Our child will be safe." Zarephina felt emotions overwhelming her heart. Tears flowed down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy and hope, and Gyges' arms. She felt that nothing mattered anymore, that their love could overcome any obstacle, even the power of the shadows that still lurked. And the following days, Gyges and Zarephina kept their secret meetings in the gardens of the Cimmerian palace. Gyges used the ring only to be close to him, but the promise made to the giant's spirit weighed on him. He could not use it to secure his power, but only to protect what he loved. Every step, every touch was charged with emotion, but also with concern for the child's future. Zarephina felt how the pregnancy changed her body and soul. Each beat of the child's heart brought her so much joy, as well as fear, knew that the birth of a child for Gyges could provoke envy and hatred from those who still harbored resentment for the past. But at the same time, every movement, every laugh of the child was a promise that their love would survive. Gyges, meanwhile, remembered Caoline and the other chosen ones who had fallen on the battlefield. He knew that every sacrifice had been made to protect the kingdom, and now, with this news of the birth of a child, his responsibility doubled. He was no longer only the savior of Lydia, but the father of an heir, a bearer of hope and light. One evening, watching the stars reflected in the waters of the fountain of the Cimmerian palace, Zarephina asked him, "Gyges, what will happen to the throne of Lydia and Cimmeria?" "Will our child be caught between the kingdoms?" "No," he answered, looking into her eyes. "We will find a way. Our child will be bound not by kingdoms, but by our love and wisdom. The betrayals of the past will not overshadow their lives." This meant that the sacrifices made by Gyges and Zarephina so far would be rewarded not with power or a crown, but with peace and family. But the memory of Queen Pyrrhusane, who still suspected something, added a layer of tension to their souls. Although Gyges had been brave, he knew that their every move was being observed and that, at some point, the consequences would come. But, for the moment, their joy was boundless. Zarephina felt how her life and Gyges merged into a thread of light and hope, and the child growing in her womb became the symbol of a new era in this state. Gyges whispered to her, "We will go through everything, Zarephina. The curse of the ring will not separate us. We will protect this child, and through him, the future of the two kingdoms." This promise marked the beginning of a journey full of responsibility, but also of hope. Zarephina's pregnancy was not only a joyful news, but also the beginning of a new curse, of a story that would test their love, courage, and wisdom at every step. And so, in the silence of the Cimmerian night, under the gentle light of the moon and under the watchful gaze of the stars, Gyges and Zarephina prepared to face the next chapter of their destiny, the birth of a child who would change the fate of the kingdoms and reveal the true power of the curse of the hidden ring. Chapter 4. The Death of Queen Pyrrhusane. The days that followed the victories on the fields of Lydia had been filled with celebration and gratitude. But in the hearts of those involved in the battle, the shadows of the past had not dissipated. Gyges, the king of Lydia, felt a cold shiver in his chest, a premonition that the peace was only apparent and that his destiny, charged with power and love, was at a crossroads. Queen Pyrrhusane, beautiful, proud, and respected by the people, kept her face impassive in public, but inwardly she was filled with suspicion and jealousy. She suspected the connection between Gyges and Princess Zarephina, and her heart was torn between the desire to protect her throne and the fear of losing the king's love. But, like a true queen, she had remained silent, waiting for the right moment to act, analyzing every gesture, every look, and every word of the king. One evening, as the sun was setting behind the white walls of Sardis, an urgent message had arrived from a village in the north of the kingdom. The couriers brought news of a conspiracy against the queen, a hidden revenge by those who still envied Lydia's power. Pyrrhusane, aware of the danger, set off for the palace terrace, where she was to have a meeting with trusted people. Gyges, however, had learned of this conspiracy, and his gaze darkened. Although he could save her, the hidden ring gave him the opportunity to be invisible and act without witnesses. But his decision was not just one strategic. A dark feeling was born in his heart, a mixture of anger, jealousy, and the desire to protect his love for Zarephina. He crept through the palace corridors, unseen, using the power of the ring. His heart was beating fast, and every step was calculated. His gaze was fixed on Queen Pyrrhusane, who was on the palace terrace, alone, looking at the sunset that seemed to darken her thoughts. Gyges followed her without her noticing him, feeling his blood boiling in his veins. That moment, he could intervene, save her, change her fate, and avoid a scandal that would have shaken the kingdom. But a dark thought crossed his mind. The queen could not have children, and his love for Zarephina demanded a future without rivals. "If I let her go," Gyges said to himself, "nothing will stand between me and Zarephina." On the palace terrace, Pyrrhusane felt something was wrong. The wind brought a cold shiver to her, and her hair rustled strangely. Raising his eyes to the sky, he saw an olive that she held in her hand, preparing it for a quick snack. But he did not know that this simple gesture would become her last moment. Gyges, invisible and unwavering, watched the scene. His heart was torn between desire and conscience, knew that he could save her life with a simple movement, push her back to safety, or use the ring to create an appearance of protection. But the decision had already been made. Queen Pyrrhusane gracefully removed her glove, tasted the olive, and stumbled. A second of inattention, a moment of weakness. The olive blocked her throat, and her breathing stopped. That moment, Gyges felt a strange tension. He could have intervened, but he did not. Watching the queen struggle, Gyges felt a mixture of satisfaction and guilt. Although his personal desire had been, his soul was marked by cruelty. Every passing second bound him more tightly to the curse of the ring, the power that allowed him to control his destiny, but which also pushed him towards the shadows of morality. When 𝕬𝖕 fell into the immense void of the terrace, Gyges felt his heart torn, but no emotion made him intervene. The ring had given him the opportunity to save her, but he had chosen not to. He knew that his deed would remain a secret, but he also knew that his destiny had changed forever. The next seconds were a struggle between reason and feeling. Gyges felt triumphant because nothing stood between him and Zarephina, but every moment had reminded him of Caoline and the other chosen ones who had fallen for the kingdom. Their cross, their sacrifice, now seemed completely overshadowed by his own choice. That evening, the palace was plunged into silence. No one knew what had happened to the queen. The courtiers were looking for her, calling her, but Gyges remained alone, invisible, watching the sunset that seemed to burn the sky in red and gold, mirroring the fire that burned in his soul. 𝕬𝖕, he murmured, his voice trembling and barely audible in the wind. I'm sorry, but our journey must continue. This silent crime would be hidden in the history of the kingdom as a mystery, and Gyges felt that his destiny had become even harder. Although Lydia was saved and the people loved him, his heart now carried the burden of a hidden deed, a deed that would return like a shadow over his future and the child that was to be born. Zarephina, still ignoring what had happened, awaited him with emotion and hope. Gyges knew that every smile of hers, every touch, would be mixed with his guilt and silence. Their love continued to grow, but under the shadow of a fatal decision, which would define the destiny of Lydia's kingdom and give birth to the future of the curse of the hidden ring. This night, when the stars were reflected in the waters of the palace fountains, Gyges felt that the past and the future had merged. His deeds were no longer just those of a king, but of a man caught between power, love, and morality. 𝕬𝖕 was dead, and his fate was now tied to Zarephina, her child, and the curse that lurked invisibly in the shadow of the ring. Gyges retreated to the throne room, looking at the bloody shield and the scars of battles. A bitter lesson lay before him. Power without compassion can bring gains, but also shadows that will never dissipate. His decision to let 𝕬𝖕 die bound him irrevocably to the path that love, destiny, and the curse of the ring were following. And so, in the silence of the night, under the moonlight that penetrated through the columns of the palace, Gyges was left alone, with the ring hidden on his finger and his thoughts filled with pain and determination. He knew that the next few days would be decisive. Zarephina's pregnancy, the child's future, and the shadows of the sorcerer Morgath would test his courage, love, and strength to face the curse. The Hidden Ring. Chapter 5. The Union of the Kingdoms. The death of Queen 𝕬𝖕 had been a shock to the people, but the news had passed like a shadow quickly dissipated by the rays of a new beginning. Sardis, the great capital of Lydia, was now buzzing with anticipation of an event like no other, the marriage of King Gyges to the Cimmerian princess Zarephina. The union of the two kingdoms, Lydia and Cimmeria, promised a lasting peace, an alliance that would bring prosperity and power throughout Asia Minor. The people, although still mourning the loss of the queen, saw in Zarephina a new hope, a woman beautiful as the dawn and wise as the deep seas. The palace of Sardis had been transformed into a place of splendor and beauty. The white marble columns had been adorned with garlands of white and red flowers, a symbol of unity and love. Pages dressed in golden robes ran from one corner to the other. Another, carrying wine vessels, fruit baskets, and chests of jewels. On the great cobblestone streets, craftsmen had prepared their works: gold necklaces, jade-handled daggers, purple fabrics, gifts for the king and his queen. From every corner of the kingdom came troops of dancers, singers, poets, and storytellers, who would elevate the festivity to the rank of legend. For weeks, Lydian and Cimmerian messengers had trodden the roads, bearing invitations from neighboring kings, princes, and allied leaders. Sardis was to be, for a whole month, the center of the world. The morning of that day had risen under a clear sky, as if the gods themselves were blessing the event. Hundreds of torches, lit since the early hours, burned on the walls of the city, and bronze bells rang out, calling the people to gather in front of the palace. Zarephina appeared accompanied by 6 Cimmerian maidens, all dressed in blue garments like the summer sky. Her dress was made of white silk, embroidered with gold threads, and in her hair she wore a thin golden crown, adorned with blue stones like sapphires. Her face radiated with emotion and fear as she stepped towards a destiny that would forever link her life to that of Gyges. King Gyges was waiting for her at the end of the temple of Artemis, the place chosen for the ceremony. Dressed in a red cloak, with a golden diadem on his forehead and a sword at his hip, he seemed the embodiment of a legendary ruler. His gaze never left Zarephina. In his eyes one could read both the burning love and the determination to do anything to keep her by his side. The Lydian and Cimmerian priests recited incantations and prayers, calling upon the gods' blessing upon the two. In the center of the temple an altar had been placed on which a sacred fire burned, a symbol of unity kingdoms. Gyges and Zarephina joined hands above the flame, and the high priest spoke in a solemn voice. "From this day, your kingdoms are no longer two, but one. From this day, your blood will carry the destiny of the united peoples. From this day, your love and oath will be stronger than sword and shield." Murmur of amazement and joy ran through the crowd. The people burst into applause and shouts of glory. "Long live King Gyges! Long live Queen Zarephina!" After the solemn ceremony, Sardis was engulfed in celebration. The squares were filled with tables spread with delicacies, roasted meat, wine from amphorae, honey and nut cakes. Bands of musicians played non-stop, dancers spun in dizzying circles, and poets recited odes dedicated to the new sovereigns. Day and night, for 30 days, the city vibrated with song and laughter. Every day, a different district hosted banquets, and Gyges and Zarephina appeared on the decorated streets, blessing the people with their presence. And the palace, foreign courtiers brought precious gifts, pearls from the Aegean islands, ivory from Egypt, Damascus steel weapons from Phrygia. King 𝕷𝖵𝖗𝖉, Zarephina's father, although still wounded and weak, had sent a symbolic gift, a centuries-old Cimmerian crown, for his daughter to wear as queen of a united kingdom. But among the shouts of joy and songs of glory, there were also shadows. The wizard Morgath had not appeared, but it was rumored that he was watching from shadow, filled with hatred and jealousy. He had once been devoted to Zarephina, he had loved her secretly, and now he saw how the woman he had desired became queen alongside his rival. On the 12th night of the holidays, when the wine flowed in waves and the people danced by torchlight, Gyges took Zarephina aside on the palace terrace. "Look, my beloved," he said to her, pointing to the crowd. "All these people love and respect you. Today, fate has united us forever." Zarephina looked at him with moist eyes. "And yet, my heart is filled with fear. My father lies wounded, and Morgath lurks in the shadows. I wonder if the gods will truly bless this union." Gyges squeezed her hands tightly. "Do not be afraid. As long as we are together, no one can separate us. I swore to be by your side until death." But, deep down, Gyges knew that he carried with him a secret that he had not revealed to her, the death of Queen Pyrrhusane. He had hidden the truth from her, hoping that time would cover this silent crime with silence. But the ring on his finger always reminded him of the power and the curse that followed him. At the end of the 30 days of festivities, the people gathered again in front of the palace. A sea of torches lit the night, and the sky was full of stars. Gyges and Zarephina stood on the royal balcony, holding hands. "People of Lydia and Cimmeria," Gyges shouted in a loud voice, "from this moment on, there are no longer two kingdoms, but one. Your sons and daughters will live together, under the same sky, under the same law, and under the same crown." The cries of the people shook the walls of the city. Zarephina, her eyes sparkling with tears, added, "May our love be the foundation of peace. May our blood bring forth heirs worthy to rule this united kingdom." The crowd erupted in cheers, and the priests raised their hands to the sky, blessing them. But somewhere, in a hidden hut on the edge of the 𝕳𝖉𝖶 forests, Morgath watched the flames of torches in the distance. His eyes burned with hatred and jealousy, and his voice whispered, "Let them rejoice now. Soon, their love will turn into a curse. Soon, the ring that Gyges hides will bring him ruin." Thus ended the month of feasting, the greatest celebration Lydia had ever known. The people loved their new sovereigns, and the United Kingdoms seemed unshakable. But in the heart of the king lurked the guilt for Pyrisanna's death, and in the shadows of the forests, the wizard Morgath was preparing dark plans. The union of the kingdoms had been sealed with oaths, but the curse of the ring had not been extinguished. He was waiting for the moment to wake up, to demand the price for the stolen power. Chapter 6. The Birth of Alyattes. The 7th month since the wedding of King Gyges to Princess Zarephina brought with it the expectation of a historic moment. The palace of Sardis was abuzz with excitement, for the queen, now loved and respected by the Lydians, was on the verge of giving birth to the first heir to the throne. For the people, this child was not only the fruit of a love affair, but also the guarantee of a united dynasty, of a strong Lydia and a reconciled Cimmeria. The days leading up to the event were shrouded in an atmosphere of solemnity. Courtiers spoke in whispers in the corridors, priests brought offerings to the gods, and the queen's maids competed in care and devotion. And in the midst of this commotion, Gyges seemed more troubled than ever. Although his face was serene before the people, his heart was a mixture of joy and fear. He ardently desired that this child would give birth healthy, to be the heir who would seal the alliance between Lydia and Cimmeria. But deep in his soul, the voice of old 𝕊𝖓, the one who had spoken to him about the curse of the giants, echoed incessantly, "Your firstborn will be the price, if you do not return the ring from the tomb from which you took it." And yet, Gyges had chosen to keep the secret hidden, even from Zarephina. How could he disturb her heart at such moments, when her entire being was focused on the child who was about to come into the world? Night came with a heavy silence. The full moon shone over Sardis, and strange outlines were drawn in the sky, like premonitions, and the royal apartments. Candles burned in golden chandeliers, spreading a warm but trembling light. Zarephina, pale and beautiful as a marble statue, lay on the silk bed, her hands clasped over her belly. The Lydian and Cimmerian midwives, summoned from both kingdoms, whirled tirelessly, preparing remedies, singing incantations, and asking the gods for an easy birth. The queen's cries resounded from time to time, cutting through the silence of the night, and Gyges, although advised to stay outside, could not part with her. He stood by the bed, holding her hand and whispering words of courage to her. "Zarephina, the power of the gods is with you. Be strong, my beloved. Our son will change the destiny of the kingdoms." Zarephina looked at him with wide eyes, full of tears, and that look, love, fear, and hope mingled. The hours passed slowly, each moment seeming like an eternity. Finally, the child's cry echoed in the room. The midwives lifted a red-faced, lively baby into their arms, and a solemn gesture. The oldest of them showed him to the king. "King Gyges, here is your son." Gyges' heart filled with a joy he had never known before. Tears choked his voice as he received the child in his arms. He hugged him to his chest, and then, with a trembling but powerful voice, he said, "He will be called Alyattes." That moment, the bronze bells of Sardis began to beat loudly. The cries of the guards had announced to the city the birth of the heir. "A son is born. Long live Prince Alyattes." An explosion of joy spread throughout the capital. People came out of their houses with torches, danced in the streets, sang and drank in honor of the new prince. The squares were decorated with garlands, and in honor of the heir hundreds of cattle were slaughtered and thousands of offerings were brought to the temples. The men raised their wine cups and shouted, "The dynasty of Gyges will last forever." The women looked with emotion towards the palace, blessing the newborn, and the elders bowed and whispered prayers to Artemis and Apollo, asking that the little one be protected from wars and curses. For 7 days and 7 nights, Sardis lived in celebration. The singers raised odes in honor of Prince Alyattes, and the Cimmerian and Lydian poets composed verses that would be spoken for generations. From the blood of Gyges and Zarephina a new son was born for the two kingdoms. But while the people rejoiced, the shadows had not disappeared, and his apartments. Gyges looked at his sleeping son and felt a lump in his throat. He remembered the words of the old 𝕊𝖓𝖓. The firstborn of your race will be the price, if the ring does not return to the giant's tomb. Although he had taken a step towards giving up ring, he felt that the connection between him and this cursed object had not been completely broken. Tonight, in his dreams, he often saw the giant rising from the grave and his huge hand reaching out to snatch his son. Zarephina, overwhelmed by the happiness of motherhood, did not suspect these worries. She held her child to her chest, caressed him, and sang songs from her Cimmerian childhood. "Alyattes," she said softly, "you will be the link between Lydia and Cimmeria. You will bring peace where there was war." Gyges looked at her with love, but also with fear. He knew that if the curse fell upon them, the promised peace would fall apart. 3 days after the birth, the high priest of the Lydian temples came to bless the child. Accompanied by a retinue of singers and offering-bearers, he lifted Alyattes to the sky and said, "May the gods watch over you, son of Gyges and Zarephina. You will be the scepter that unites, the fire that guides, and the sword that defends." But, of all those present, only 𝕊𝖓𝖗, the wise man, felt a cold shiver, knew about the existence of the ring and the curse, looked at Gyges with piercing eyes, and, after the ceremony, pulled him aside. "King," he said in a low voice, "now you are a father. It is no longer just about you or the kingdom. It is about the life of your child. Give up the ring before the curse is fulfilled." Gyges crossed his arms, feeling caught between love and power. "Not now, 𝕊𝖓𝖗. The people need a strong king. But I promise you, for Alyattes, I will find a way to break this curse." The birth of Alyattes brought boundless joy to the Lydian and Cimmerian people. The streets of Sardis resounded with songs, the temples were filled with offerings, and the hearts of the people were united in the hope of a bright future. But behind the smiles and celebrations, shadows were gathering. The wizard Morgath, hidden from everyone's eyes, had learned the news, and his hatred had grown even more. He knew that this child was the key to the future of the United Kingdoms and, above all, the key to Zarephina's heart and the palace. Gyges looked at his son with love, but at the same time he felt the weight of an unseen burden. The ring, hidden deep within him, linked him to a destiny in which happiness and curse went hand in hand. And so, at the dawn of a new era, while the people were still celebrating, in the heart of the king and the wise 𝕊𝖓𝖗, the question was born: how long will it be before the curse of the ring? Will he reach out to kidnap little Alyattes? Chapter 7. Morgath discovers the truth. A few months had passed since Alyattes was born, and peace seemed to reign over the two united kingdoms. Sardis, the capital of Lydia, was flourishing with a rare splendor, and Cimmeria, now ruled by Zarephina as queen and Gyges by her side, was finding peace after years of tension. People saw in the little prince the symbol of this golden age, and the songs of the bards were already elevating him to the rank of hero. But not everyone shared this joy, and the shadow of the forests and ancient ruins, the exiled wizard Morgath, lived with hatred in his soul. His snake eyes watched from afar everything that happened in the royal palaces. For him, the birth of the child was an affront, a proof of betrayal. Deep in his dark heart, Morgath knew that something was not right. Still, ever since Zarephina had been a Cimmerian princess, Morgath had sensed a strange presence. He had been given the ability to detect shadows moving through the palace. Barely perceptible noises, footsteps that could not be seen. He, who knew all forms of magic, had sensed a hidden energy, something different from ordinary spells. He had not understood it then, but now, looking at Gyges and Zarephina, looking at their child, the threads were connected. For only a magic of invisibility could explain how Gyges had entered her without her knowledge, how their forbidden love had blossomed in secret. So, he muttered in his solitude, it was not by the will of the gods that they were united, but by a dark artifice. Gyges, you carry a secret with you, and I will tear it out in front of everyone. Morgath knew of the existence of the ancient hidden rings, relics of the giants, and the dusty manuscripts. He had discovered fragments of their power. The rings were created to subdue the will of men and to link the world of the living with that of the spirits. But he did not know who had that ring, until, little by little, the pieces fell into place. The conspiratorial glances between Gyges and Zarephina, the oppressive silences, the suspicious death of Queen 𝕬𝖃, all formed a web that enveloped Gyges. "Yes," whispered Morgath, "Gyges was the invisible one, entered the princess's room, is the cursed one who dared to disturb the order of the gods." Determined to gather evidence, Morgath sent spies to Sardis. Among them was a wandering merchant, who had the freedom to enter the markets and taverns of the city. One evening, the spy brought the wizard news that confirmed his suspicions. "Master, people say that King Gyges has a strange strength. No one has ever seen him enter the Cimmerian palace when she was just a princess, and yet Zarephina became pregnant. There are whispers that his power is greater than that of any mortal." Morgath burst into a dry laugh, like a blade cutting stone. "Good, then, if the people whisper, I will make them shout, to confirm his suspicions." Morgath returned to the 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 forest, where Gyges had once entered Zarephina invisibly. The wizard knew every tree, every rock. He sat down in the clearing where the spirits were most alive and lit his ritual fires. He summoned the shadows of the past, shouting to the wind and the earth, "Show me the truth. Who was it that stepped unseen into the palace?" The vision appeared like a red mist, and in it, the silhouette of Gyges appeared, wearing a ring on his finger that sparkled with a dark green light. Morgath bit his lips, convinced now that his suspicions were true. "I have him," he whispered. "I have the culprit." Now that he knew the truth, Morgath had to find a way to use it against Gyges. He knew that the Lydian and Cimmerian people loved him, and Zarephina would always be by his side. But if he succeeded, if he had revealed the secret of invisibility, people would have seen not a beloved king but a cursed sorcerer. He told himself that he must be patient, he must gather evidence and strike at the most opportune moment, when all of Lydia and all of Cimmeria would be looking at Gyges. Then, in front of everyone, I will tear his mask and show the truth. Morgath now remembered Queen 𝕬𝖃. He had been among the few who had noticed her suspicions. 𝕬𝖃 had suspected even then that there was more between Gyges and Zarephina than met the eye, but her sudden death had put an end to the questions. "Ah, 𝕬𝖃, you died without knowing the whole truth, but I will avenge him." The sorcerer felt that the spirit of the queen, left without peace, still floated in the shadows of the palace of Sardis. Morgath was to be the mouth that would speak on her behalf, and the same days, Irenaeus the wise felt the growing anxiety in turn. He knew about the ring and feared that Morgath might discover what should have remained hidden. In a conversation with Gyges, he said to him, "King, I feel that the sorcerer has not disappeared. His ears and eyes are everywhere. If he finds out about the ring, the people will no longer see you as a savior, but as a traitor to the gods." Gyges frowned, but clenched his fist firmly. "I will not give him this power. No one will know the truth, not even the closest of the courtiers." But silently, he feared. What if Morgath already suspected? What if he managed to weave a story that would ignite hatred in the hearts of men? In the weeks that followed, Sardis continued to live in joy, but unseen clouds gathered over the kingdom. Alyattes grew, and the people adored him. But Morgath, hidden in the darkness, gathered evidence, plotted, and prepared his blow. Tonight, in Gyges' dreams, the voice of the giant from the tomb now mingled with the whispers of the sorcerer. "You have sinned. You have stolen love. You have let a queen die. You have worn the cursed ring, and the price will be paid." Deep in his heart, Gyges knew that the truth could not be hidden for long. Morgath smelled the scent of power, and when the truth came to light, not only the throne, but also the life of little Alyattes would be in danger. Chapter 8. The Wizard's Plan. Time flowed slowly, but Morgath's patient venom deepened with each passing day. The wizard, isolated in the dark forests of 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖃, had built himself a secret hideout among the ruins of a forgotten fortress. Green fires burned ever burning in his hearth, and dusty scrolls, full of symbols and incantations, were testaments to a magic that few still mastered. Knew that he alone could not bring down Gyges. The King of Lydia now had the support of his people, the love of Zarephina, and most dangerous of all, the giant's ring. But Morgath had one special asset, hatred, and hatred, in the hands of a shadow man, could become a weapon sharper than any sword. Deep within the Cimmerian palace, King 𝕷𝖵𝖗 lived in bitter silence. Aged and weary of war, he bore the burden of the worst betrayal in his eyes. His own daughter Zarephina had chosen his enemy as husband and father of the heir. For a Cimmerian king, this was an unforgivable humiliation. Although the people had accepted peace and saw in Alyattes a symbol of union, 𝕷𝖵𝖗 could not forgive his daughter and his soul. A fierce battle was fought between the love of a father and the pride of a king. And into this open wound Morgath would penetrate, like a snake that senses the scent of blood. On a moonless night, Morgath crept into Cimmeria, wearing his black cloak and his staff adorned with strange symbols. No soldier saw him, for his spells hid him from mortal eyes. He reached the gates of the palace, and, through a secret tunnel dug in ancient times, he entered the inner courtyard. There, King 𝕷𝖵𝖗 was waiting for him, alone, his hand resting on his sword. Although old, his eyes still burned with the fire of a leader who had never forgotten humility. "Morgath," whispered 𝕷𝖵𝖗, "I knew you would come. Your shadows have haunted my walls for too long." The wizard bowed his head, with a cold smile. "And I knew, your majesty, that your wound still bleeds. I have come to offer you what neither the army, nor the gods, nor the years have given you: revenge." The king looked at him with suspicion, but also with a glimmer of hope. "Revenge? What can you give me, wizard of shadows, that I could not take with my own sword?" Morgath raised his staff, and a greenish flame burst from its tip. "The truth, your majesty. Gyges is not just a man, he carries a forbidden power, a ring that makes him invisible. With it he penetrated your daughter, with it he stole your honor and linked your blood with the blood of a sorcerer." 𝕷𝖵𝖗 flinched, and his heart tightened. Morgath's words were like arrows. So, it was not just her desire, but also magic? "A magic and a murder," Morgath added with a smile. "Queen Pyrrhusane did not die of illness, but through the carelessness of Gyges, who let her perish in order to make his way to the throne and to your daughter." 𝕷𝖵𝖗 clenched his fists on the hilt of his sword, his eyes burning with rage. "If you tell the truth, then not only did he steal my daughter, but also the honor of my kingdom. And I, my lord, am the one who can help you overthrow him. But for that, we need an alliance, and the secret hall of the Cimmerian palace." Morgath and 𝕷𝖵𝖗 swore an oath to each other. The wizard brought knowledge of magic and a thirst for destruction, and the king offered the power of an army and the authority of the throne. Morgath took from his cloak a small bottle of dark crystal, in which a liquor shone with blue reflections. "Here," he said, "is the key to confronting Gyges, a potion created from the tears of the night and the blood of the earth. The one who drinks it becomes invisible. Like him, we will no longer be helpless before his power." 𝕷𝖵𝖗 looked at the bottle and felt a shiver. He was afraid of magic, but hatred pushed him to accept. "And if I drink it?" "Then you will step into the world of shadows, king, and you will be able to fight Gyges on equal terms." Thus, the Cimmerian king raised the goblet, and with a decisive gesture, swallowed the liquor. His body trembled, his eyes darkened for a moment, and then he disappeared. Morgath burst into a triumphant laugh. "Welcome, my lord, to the realm of shadows. Now, no wall will stand in your way." Armed with his newfound power, 𝕷𝖵𝖗 began to dream of the moment when he would catch Gyges off guard. The plan was simple, yet treacherous. Morgath would sow rumors among the courtiers and the people, revealing half the truth about the ring. 𝕷𝖵𝖗, invisible, would pierce Gyges' heart right in the palace of Sardis. But the sorcerer, silently, was weaving his own calculations. He not only wanted the Lydian king dead, but absolute control of the kingdoms. He knew that 𝕷𝖵𝖗 was a temporary pawn. Deep down, Morgath dreamed of a world ruled not by kings of blood, but by those who ruled the shadows. However, not everyone in the Cimmerian palace viewed this rapprochement with favor. Selena, the princess's trusted maid, she caught Morgath sneaking in and overheard snippets of their conversation. Horrified, she ran to Artis. the young man of royal blood and Gyges' trusted man. "Ardis," she whispered, "the sorcerer and the king have made a pact." Chapter 9. The Invisibility Potion. Night had fallen over the lands of Cimmeria with an unnatural silence. The stars, usually bright in the cold sky of the steppes, seemed hidden behind gray clouds, as if the sky itself refused to bear witness to what was about to happen. Deep within the Cimmerian palace, in a hidden room forgotten even by the oldest servants, Morgath was preparing his work altar. The room was a sanctuary of shadows. The walls were covered with burnt furs, and the floor bore the traces of runic circles drawn with ash and blood, and in the middle, a huge cauldron, forged from a metal as black as obsidian, was placed on 3 legs carved in the shape of demon claws. A greenish, pungent smoke rose from it, penetrating to the marrow of your bones. Morgath moved with precise, almost ritualistic gestures. His eyes sparkled with the fever of creation, and his voice trembled as he murmured the incantations written on the ancient parchments. "To face a ring of giants," he said, "we must give birth to a power of equal rank. The Gyges ring gives him invisibility, but also a curse. We will create his mirror, a liquor that will offer the same gifts, but for those who want to use the darkness." 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 watched him, silent, but with a smoldering unease. Although he wanted to defeat Gyges, his kingly heart still struggled between honor and curse. But hatred, fueled by Zarephina's betrayal, was stronger than any hesitation. "Tell me, wizard, what do we need?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Morgath picked up a box carved from ebony and opened it. Inside were 3 objects, a raven feather, a white wolf tooth, and a shining stone, as if torn from the heart of the mountain. "For the potion, we need 3 gifts of the shadows. The raven feather symbolizes vision in the dark, the wolf tooth gives the strength to walk unseen, and the mountain stone brings the power to pass through barriers. But all this is only the body. The soul of the potion will be given by the blood of a king." 𝕳𝖉𝖉 frowned. "My blood?" "Yes," Morgath answered with a cold smile. "Only your blood can bind this potion to the realm of men. Without it, the liquor would be nothing but futile smoke." The Cimmerian king drew the knife from his belt and, without blinking, cut his palm. The blood dripped red and thick into the black cauldron. That moment, the flames around him rose, dancing in green and blue shadows. The smoke thickened, and a strange murmur was heard in the air, as if thousands of voices were whispering at once. Morgath poured the blue liquor he had kept in his crystal bottle into the cauldron. When the drops touched the king's blood, green sparks erupted, illuminating their faces. "Frighteningly." "Beyond the veils of night," said Morgath, "I call upon the power of shadows. Grant the drinker unseen eyes, an unseen body, and an unseen path. Bind him to the darkness and make him one with it." 𝕳𝖉𝖉 felt the air grow heavy, almost unbreathable. A dizziness gripped him, as if the entire room were spinning. But Morgath continued, his voice firm, like a shadow bell. The liquor in the cauldron began to gather, forming a black liquid, but at the same time shining, like the surface of a water at midnight. The wizard took a golden goblet and filled it, raising it to the king. "This is the gift and the curse," he said. "Drink, 𝕳𝖉𝖉, and become the shadow." The king raised his chin, looking at him with a mixture of defiance and determination. "If this will bring me victory, then so be it." With a determined movement, he drank the entire liquor. The taste was bitter, like molten iron and ash, but also sweet, like spoiled honey, and the next moment, his body began to tremble. His skin was covered with shadows, his eyes darkened, and, little by little, his body disappeared from before his eyes. "Perfect," Morgath whispered with a smile. The shadow was born. 𝕳𝖉𝖉 laughed with a hollow voice that seemed to come from all directions. "I feel light, Morgath, as if I no longer belong to this world. I can pass through walls. I can move without noise. It is a power never seen before." But his joy was soon overshadowed. He felt a pain in his chest, like a claw digging into his heart. "What is this?" he shouted. The wizard raised his staff and chuckled. "It is the price, your majesty, and power comes without sacrifice. From this moment on, your soul is bound to the shadows. You may be invisible, but with each use, you will lose a piece of who you are in the end. Nothing will remain but darkness. 𝕳𝖓𝖊𝖏 clenched his fists, but he did not resist. I accept. If this is my fate, then so be it. As long as Gyges falls, I fear nothing. For Morgath, the moment was the culmination of his plan. Not only had the king become his ally, but he was now also a prisoner of his own power. The curse of the liquor bound him to the sorcerer, and without it, 𝕳𝖓𝖊𝖏 would perish in an instant. I will show you how to use the gift, Morgath said, touching his shoulder with his staff. But remember, every step in the shadows brings you closer to your doom. 𝕳𝖓𝖊𝖏, though weakened by pain, looked up stubbornly. It doesn't matter. Gyges must pay. After the effects had stabilized, the king looked at himself in an old, broken mirror. His face was changed. His eyes burned with a foreign, yellowish light, and black veins could be seen at his temples, pulsing with the beat of his heart. He ran his hand over his face and winced. His skin was colder, like stone. "What have you done to me, Morgath?" he whispered. "I have given you what you have always wanted, the power to no longer be human, but something more." 𝕳𝖓𝖊𝖏 fell silent, knowing there was no turning back, and the days that followed, rumors began to circulate through the palace. Servants said that sometimes, when the king walked the corridors, not a single footstep could be heard. Others swore that they had seen his figure disappear through the walls. The Cimmerian court was growing increasingly restless. But Morgath knew that everything was going according to plan. In a corner of his room, an ancient parchment noted every step of the ritual. The potion had been created, and now it was to be used against Gyges. And one final scene, Morgath and 𝕳𝖓𝖏𝖏 looked out at the bloody sunset together. "Soon," said the sorcerer, "Sardis will fall. The ring of Gyges will be ours." 𝕳𝖓𝖏𝖏, still feeling the pain of the curse, raised his fist in the air. "May the shadows be witnesses. I will not stop until the blood of Gyges flows on the earth." But in the silence of the night, it seemed as if the gods were whispering among themselves. He who embraces the darkness never escapes it. Chapter 10. Celaena's Betrayal. At dawn on a rainy day, the Cimmerian palace was shrouded in a tension that only attentive hearts could feel. The rain beat against the tall windows like 1,000 warning drums, and shadows slithered along the corridors like black snakes. In the midst of this oppressive atmosphere, a young maid, Celaena, crept silently through the cold rooms of the castle. Celaena was no ordinary maid. She had been raised at the court of Princess Zarephina, her confidant, shadow, and friend since childhood. She was a young woman with hair as black as night and sparkling eyes that often hid more secrets than their gentle light let on. But now, in her heart, there was not only loyalty to her princess, but also love for young Ardis, the one with royal blood, which carried in it the hope of a different future. For several days, Celaena had noticed strange movements in the palace. The wizard Morgath and King 𝕳𝖓𝖏𝖏 often retreated to the old wing of the castle, where no one was allowed to enter. Evening after evening, strange noises could be heard, the bubbling of cauldrons, the murmur of incantations, the muffled screams of sacrificed birds. Curiosity and fear consumed her. One night, when the storm covered every sound, Celaena put her courage to the test and followed the two. She slipped through the dark corridors, hidden behind heavy curtains and cracked statues. She reached the secret hall, where, through a crack in the door, she glimpsed a spectacle of horror. 𝕳𝖓𝖏𝖏, the old king, raised a goblet to his lips and drank from a black liquor, while Morgath uttered incantations in a demonic voice. Before her eyes, the king disappeared as if melting into thin air. Only his voice, full of wonder and pain, remained in the room. "It's true, I'm invisible," he whispered. Celaena covered her mouth with her hands to keep from screaming. She understood now. Morgath had created a potion that could equal the power of Gyges' ring. If it fell into their hands, Zarephina and her child, and the entire kingdom, were lost. Celaena ran to her room, her heart beating wildly. She could have remained silent to protect her own life. But the memory of Princess Zarephina, who had once given her a gold bracelet saying, "You are the sister the gods denied me," gave her courage. "I must take the potion," she told herself. "I must take her to Gyges, for only he can face this danger." That night, under the cover of the storm, 𝕬𝖓na prepared for the most dangerous act of her life. In the dark gardens of the palace, she met 𝕬𝖓𝖓, the young man of royal blood. He was waiting for her, supported by the trunk of a cypress tree, his eyes shining in the pale moonlight. "Have you found out something?" he asked her, in a whisper. 𝕬𝖓na bit her lip, trying to control her fear. "Yes. They created a liquor one that grants invisibility. I saw how King 𝕬𝖓𝖓 drank and became invisible. Morgath bound him to the shadows. If we don't do something, all is lost." 𝕬𝖓𝖓 froze. The liquor is more dangerous than the ring. They must reach Gyges. Their eyes met. For a moment, they forgot everything around them, and their souls, love sprouted like a fire, even though they knew that danger was at their door. "I will help you, 𝕬𝖓na," 𝕬𝖓𝖓 told her. "We will take the liquor together till midnight." The two of them crept into the old wing of the palace. The corridors were guarded by guards, but their love and courage made them go further. They hid in the shadows, crept up the stairs, and finally reached the ritual hall. The door was locked, but 𝕬𝖓𝖓 forced the latch with a short dagger. Inside, a smoldering fire still burned in the cauldron on a stone table. Next to parchments and strange objects was a small black crystal bottle in which the cursed liquor sparkled. 𝕬𝖓na approached, trembling. She felt that the liquid was watching her, that the shadows within it were whispering. But she overcame her fear, reached out and took it. "We have what we were looking for," she said, in a weak voice. That moment, a noise was heard in the corridor. Heavy footsteps, shouts. Morgath was returning. "Quick," 𝕬𝖓𝖓 whispered. The two of them left through a side door, running through dark passages. The guards howled after them, torches burned, but love and fear pushed them forward. They reached the stables and, without thinking, mounted a horse as black as obsidian. The wind whipped their faces, the rain stung their eyes, but the horse galloped towards the border of the kingdom. Behind them, Morgath shouted curses that made the sky tremble. After 2 days and 2 nights of travel, exhausted, 𝕬𝖓na and 𝕬𝖓𝖓 reached Sardis. The city welcomed them with amazement, and the news quickly reached the palace. King Gyges, tired of his own turmoil, received them in the throne room. "Why have you come?" he asked, with cold severity. 𝕬𝖓𝖓 knelt, and 𝕬𝖓na raised the bottle with trembling hands. "Your Majesty, Morgath created a potion. I saw with my own eyes how King 𝕬𝖓𝖓 drank from it and became invisible. I risked everything to bring it here. Take it, for only you know how to use it." Gyges took the bottle, looked at it in the torchlight, and felt a cold shiver. "This is a power that can destroy kingdoms," he murmured. "And yet, it may be the key to stopping Morgath." His gaze frowned, but a shadow of fear flickered in the depths of his eyes. He realized that his destiny was increasingly tied to the curse of the ring and now to this potion. Gyges looked at the two young men. 𝕬𝖓𝖓 held 𝕬𝖓na's hand, protecting her with a love that even kings could not ignore. "You have done an act of courage. If the shadows have risen against us, then we will respond with the light and power of the people." 𝕬𝖓na felt tears burning on her cheeks. For the first time, she felt that her sacrifice had had a purpose. That night, in the palace of Sardis, the invisibility potion shone on Gyges' table, like a second curse of fate. 𝕬𝖓na had found her courage, 𝕬𝖓𝖓 had found his calling. And Gyges knew that the battle with Morgath had only just begun. But somewhere, in the darkness of Cimmeria, Morgath was already plotting a new plan, and his voice rose like thunder. "You have stolen the gift of the shadows. For this, your blood will flow like a river." Chapter 11. Old Feranius. The wind blew harshly over the high walls of Sardis, bringing with it the smell of burnt leaves and distant rain. The city, although shrouded in celebration for the birth of Alyattes, was beginning to feel the shadows gathering on the horizon and the silence of the evening. When the guards changed torches on the bastions and the bells called the people to prayer, an unknown figure appeared at the gates of the palace. A bent old man with a white beard that reached down to his waist, leaning on a staff. carved with strange runes. The slaves at the gates looked at him with suspicion, but also with a kind of instinctive fear. His clothes were torn, but his eyes burned with an unnatural light, as if they carried within them the echo of times older than humanity itself. "Who are you, old man?" one of the guards asked. Raising his spear, the stranger looked up, and his voice resounded like gentle thunder. "I am 𝕊𝖓𝖗𝖉, he who has seen the birth and death of many kingdoms. I have come to speak to your king, Gyges. What I carry within me is not a story, but a judgment." The guards staggered, unsure, but one of them ran to announce Gyges, and in a few moments the palace courtyard was filled with anxiety. Gyges himself descended to see who dared to ask for an audience in the middle of the night. He was dressed simply, in a heavy woolen cloak, but his gaze was piercing and authoritative. "What do you want from me, old man?" he asked, looking at him closely. 𝕊𝖓𝖗𝖉 bent his knees, but not as a submissive, but as a messenger of fate. "I have come to speak to you of the ring you wear, Gyges of Lydia." A murmur ran through the court. No one had mentioned that ring before, except a select few. Gyges' eyes narrowed. "How do you know about it?" 𝕊𝖓𝖗𝖉 raised his staff and touched the ground with it. A deep echo spread like a wave through the air. "I was there when the giants were buried under the mountains. I saw how the earth swallowed them, how their souls were bound to jewels meant to preserve their power. 7 rings were forged from their bones and blood, each carrying a part of the eternal curse. You wear one of them, and every moment you use it binds you more closely to their fate." A deep silence fell. Even the torches seemed to flicker more slowly. The old man continued, and his voice was like an old song, forgotten by men. "Thousands of years ago, before your kingdoms built walls and wrote laws, the land was ruled by giants. They were not just fleshly beings, but the link between the gods and the world. Their power could shake mountains, and their wrath could collapse valleys. But their thirst for power brought war. The gods, fearing that the giants would overthrow the order of the world, punished them. The earth opened, earthquakes tore the lands, and the giants were swallowed by deep graves. But before they perished, they separated their essence from their bodies and created 7 rings. Each carried a part of their power: invisibility, strength, knowledge, illusions, control over fire, over shadows, and over time. Gyges felt his skin tingle. He looked at his hand, at the finger on which he wore the ring. "The ring of invisibility." "Yes," said 𝕊𝖓𝖗𝖉, "the most cunning of gifts. It hides you from the eyes of men, but not from the eyes of the gods. Those who have worn it have always ended in shame, for each use ate away their soul. You, King of Lydia, are no exception." Gyges crossed his arms, trying to hide his unease. "And why do you come to tell me this now? Why didn't you come sooner?" The old man looked him straight in the eye. "Because the spirit of the giant whose ring you wear will awaken. Every 10 years, the earth trembles and his voice resounds. If the ring is not returned to its place by then, the giant will demand a tribute. And the tribute will be your dearest blood, your firstborn." Gyges felt his blood stop in his veins. The thought of little Alyattes, who now slept under the palace guard, struck him like a dagger. "You mean that my son is in danger?" 𝕊𝖓𝖗𝖉 nodded gravely. "Not just him, but your entire race. The curse does not stop at a single child. If you do not return the ring, your dynasty will be doomed." Zarephina, who had been watching the conversation from the shadows, approached, her pale face illuminated by the torches. "So everything I have experienced so far, all my fear, was true. Gyges, we have played with a fire that we cannot extinguish." The wise 𝕊𝖓𝖗𝖉, one of the 6 chosen ones, raised his voice. "I told you, your majesty, from the beginning, to give up the ring. But you chose another path. Now the consequences are closer than ever." The courtiers murmured, frightened. The old man's words seemed more powerful than any army. Gyges remained thoughtful. He felt caught between 2 worlds, his love for Zarephina and Alyattes, and the thirst for power that the ring had given him. He remembered the nights when he had slipped his invisible body through the corridors of the palaces, the memory of Pirisana's death, everything committed under the shadow of this ring. "If I return it," he said in a low voice, "what will happen?" 𝕬𝖓𝖗 stuck his staff into the ground and said, "Then the covenant is broken. The giant spirit will sleep again, and your blood will be pure. But if you refuse, when the earthquake comes, no one and nothing will be able to save your son." Zarephina held his hand, tears flowing down her face. "Gyges, for our son, for our future, you must give up. We cannot build a kingdom on a curse." Gyges closed his eyes. For the first time, he felt small in the face of fate. Power, glory, victory, all now seemed dust compared to the life of his child. "Okay," he said finally, "I will go with you, 𝕬𝖓𝖗. I will return the ring." The old man nodded, and a spark of relief lit up in his eyes. "So it was to be, King of Lydia. But hurry. Time is unforgiving, and the giant spirit already feels that the ring is far from his grave." That night, as the moon floated over the walls of Sardis like a silent witness, Gyges looked at his sleeping son. He touched his small forehead, and for the first time, the power he carried on his finger seemed an unbearable burden. 𝕬𝖓𝖗 watched silently from the shadows, like a guardian of fate. Soon, their paths would lead to places where time itself held its breath, to the giant's grave, where curse and destiny met. And in the distance, unseen, Morgath sharpened his fangs of revenge, ready to play his last card. Chapter 12. The Cursed Tunnel. The cold wind came down from the mountains as a foreshadowing of what was to come. The earth trembled slightly under the horses' hooves, and the branches of the 𝕳𝖓𝖗 forest bent down like hands trying to stop them. Gyges, dressed in a heavy cloak, rode alongside 𝕬𝖓𝖗 and the old 𝕬𝖓𝖗, heading towards the place that the ancient stories spoke of as a tomb of the fallen gods. Neither of them said a word. The silence was more eloquent than any sentence. Every moment spent away from the palace brought the danger of the giant spirit closer. After 2 days of arduous travel, the three reached the crater opened by the ancient earthquake. An immense ravine had torn the earth, and in its middle a dark chasm, like the mouth of a beast, could be seen. From the depths came a warm, damp wind, carrying with it the smell of old stone and burnt bones. "There," said 𝕬𝖓𝖗, leaning on his staff. "This is where the giants were once buried. The ring must return to its socket." Gyges looked into the darkness below and felt a pang of fear grip his heart. It was the first time that, as a king and a warrior, he had faced something he could not defeat with his sword. Irenaeus, the wise man, made the sign of protection, murmuring a prayer to the unseen gods. "Let us not forget," he said, "that it is not our steps that will save us, but the determination with which we move forward." They descended a steep path to the mouth of the tunnel. The entrance was guarded by 2 collapsed columns, on which inscriptions worn away by time could still be seen. Spiral symbols, intertwined circles and lines, the signs of the lost language of the giants. When they crossed the threshold, a cold sensation gripped them. The air was heavy, almost unbreathable, as if the tunnel nourished itself with the life of those who walked through it. The torches flickered abnormally, as if the flame had been drawn towards the walls by an unseen force. "This is no ordinary path," 𝕬𝖓𝖗 whispered. "It is a trial. Every step is judged by the giant spirit. If your hearts harbor doubts, you will be crushed." Gyges felt the ring on his finger burn. It was as if the metal itself was struggling, wanting it not to be returned. "It is as if the ring knows," he murmured. "It knows," the old man replied. "Cursed objects have a will, and their will is against life." The tunnel wound downward, with steps carved into the stone. Soon the walls began to vibrate. Gyges heard whispers, voices calling to him, "Do not give up on me. With me you are king. With me you are immortal." He stopped, pressing his temples. "Do you hear them?" he asked, trembling. Irenaeus and 𝕬𝖓𝖗 nodded. "They are the echoes of the giant's soul," said 𝕬𝖓𝖗. "He tempts you, lest you leave him." Suddenly, the path opened into a vast hall, and in the middle rose a stone bridge over a bottomless chasm. Shadowy arms rose from the darkness, trying to grab them. "Only the brave will pass," said 𝕬𝖍𝖗𝖉. "Don't look down, Gyges." The king stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. Each step was a struggle against fear. The shadow's arms rose, trying to pull him, but Gyges clenched the ring in his fist and moved forward. Behind him, the old man and the wise man passed, muttering prayers. When they reached the other side, the abyss disappeared like an illusion. The tunnel continued on its way. After a time that seemed eternal, they arrived in a huge hall. The walls were carved with scenes of battles. Between giants and gods, and in the middle, a large pedestal, divided into 7 niches, waited to receive its gifts. 6 of the niches were empty. Only in the 7th could the trace of gold in which the ring of invisibility was to be placed be seen. When Gyges, as he approached, an earthquake shook the hall, a red light erupted from the walls, and a deafening roar filled the tunnel. "The spirit has awakened," 𝕬𝖍𝖗 shouted. "Hurry, Gyges! Put it back!" From a crack in the floor, a huge, translucent figure rose, with eyes like embers. It was the giant, a ghost as tall as the vault of the room. "Who dares to step into my tomb?" His voice rang out, like multiplied thunder. Gyges fell to his knees, feeling the air crush him. The spirit stared at him. "You wear my ring. You, mortal, have used all my power to raise your throne. What do you offer in return?" Gyges looked up, his eyes full of fear and determination. "I give you back what does not belong to me. But spare my son, Alyattes is not guilty." The spirit laughed, and his laughter made the stones tremble. "Life demands life. If you want your child to live, you must give up not only the ring, but everything you have gained through it, the throne, the crown, the glory. Otherwise, his blood will be the price." 𝕬𝖍𝖗𝖉 took a step forward. Great Spirit, he understood the lesson. Destiny can no longer be built on theft and death. Accept his sacrifice and leave the future free. 𝕬𝖍𝖗 raised his staff and struck the stone with it. A circle of light lit up around the base. "Now, Gyges, put on the ring." Gyges raised his trembling hand. The ring seemed to dig into the flesh, as if it did not want to be removed. With a cry of pain, he tore it off and placed it in the stone niche. At that moment, the hall shook with enormous force. The red light went out, and the spirit howled with rage. "You have renounced your power. But you have saved your son for now. Remember, the blood of the giants always watches." Then the ghost melted into stone, and silence fell. Only the echo of their footsteps remained. Gyges fell to his knees, tears flowing, felt that a part of him had died there. But at the same time, an immense burden had been lifted from his shoulders. 𝕬𝖍𝖗 placed his hand on his shoulder. "You have chosen well. But know, King of Lydia, that the curse is not entirely over. The giants sleep, but their dreams haunt the world." 𝕬𝖍𝖗𝖉 helps him to his feet. "The path is long, but now your son has a chance. Let us go." And so, the 3 left the cursed tunnel, carrying in their hearts the memory of a meeting that had changed their lives forever. Chapter 13. The Awakening of the Giant Spirit. The silence in the depths was oppressive, like an invisible burden that crushed the chests of the 3, Gyges, 𝕬𝖍𝖗𝖉, and the old 𝕬𝖍𝖗𝖈. The torches flickered faintly, and their shadows danced on the damp walls of the tunnel like living beings. All that could be heard was the constant dripping of water and the heavy breathing of the king, who advanced with increasingly heavy steps. Gyges felt the ring on his finger heat up, burning his skin, as if an unseen force wanted to tear it away from him. It was hard for him to breathe, and his gaze was troubled by visions. From time to time, he heard voices, sweet whispers and promises of power, memories of battles won and of the night in which he had entered Zarephina's room, invisible, untouched. "The ring does not want to return," he said, in a hoarse voice. "It seems to feed on me." 𝕬𝖍𝖗 looked at him gravely, raising his wooden staff inlaid with runic signs. "You are not the master of the ring, Gyges. You are only its keeper. It belongs to the giants, and giants always demand back what is theirs." 𝕬𝖍𝖗𝖉, who walked with an unnatural calm, added. I knew this day would come. I saw in visions a bloody throne and a child with eyes full of light, surrounded by shadows. He was your son, Gyges. The giant spirit is not satisfied with just the ring. He wants to take what you love most, as the price of the stolen power. The king stopped suddenly, feeling his blood run cold in his veins. Alyattes, he murmured, no, I can't allow this. They reached the hall of the plinths. The high vault was covered with sculptures depicting giant beings carrying gigantic weapons and collapsing under the blows of the gods, and in the middle, the stone altar stood, with its 7 empty niches. Only one seemed alive, glowing faintly, waiting for its ring. When Gyges took a step towards the altar, the earth began to tremble. Red cracks erupted from the walls, like bleeding wounds, and a deep roar echoed from the depths. The torches suddenly went out, and absolute darkness enveloped them. A terrible wind rose from the abyss, bringing with it a heavy smell of sulfur and ash. From the middle of the hall, a dark light gathered into a colossal shape, the translucent silhouette of the giant. His eyes, like 2 suns black, lit up, and his voice echoed, making the stone vibrate. The mortal who stole my power. I finally found you. Gyges fell to his knees, feeling the weight of that voice. Irenaeus and Pharaonius barely managed to stay on their feet, leaning against the walls. The spirit rose, huge, with arms the size of rocks. You have carried my power, you have violated my rest. For that, the payment is life. Take the ring. Gyges shouted, raising his trembling hand. I give you what is yours, but spare my son. A roar of laughter thundered in the depths. You cannot deceive me. You used your power to establish your kingdom, to take your enemy's loved one, to remove your queen. Your throne is built on treason and blood. The price must be paid. Gyges felt how his soul burns. The memory of 𝕬𝖎𝖓𝖌, fallen on the battlefield, rises before him. The gaze of the dying Pyrasanna follows him. And above all, the face of Zarephina, pure and enlightened, and of little Alyattes, who still did not know what evil is. No, roared the king, if you want blood, take mine, but leave my child. The spirit looked at him long, as if it had read his thoughts. Your life is not enough for each generation that has carried my power. The firstborn must be sacrificed, such is the law. Pharaonius raised his staff, shouting, No, great spirit! You are not a god, but only a chained soul. Your curse can be broken, but only by the true sacrifice of the guilty one, Irenaeus added, in a calm but powerful voice. Gyges, listen to me. The spirit does not feed only on blood, it feeds on dominion. If you give up everything you have acquired through the ring, if you leave the throne and the glory, he will have no one to pour his curse on. Gyges felt the words penetrate his heart like arrows. Renouncing the throne? He, the king of Lydia, the one who had brought peace and united the kingdom with that of the Cimmerians, to leave everything? But then the thought of Alyattes tore his soul. The spirit of the giant approached, his shadow covering the entire hall. Decide now, for every battle of your heart, the child closes to me. And Gyges saw it, a vision of his son Alyattes, asleep in his cradle, but chains of shadow gathered around him. The little face wept silently, reaching out to his father. Alyattes, Gyges whispered, tears in his eyes. He rose with difficulty, the ring shining brighter and brighter. As if it were resisting, he tore it from his finger, and the flesh tore, blood dripping onto the stone. I give you back your power, he roared. But take the throne too. I am no longer king. And he placed the ring in the empty socket. A sudden earthquake shook the hall. The spirit howled, and the black light retreated into the stone. The vision of Alyattes shattered, the chains broke, and the silence that followed. The giant's voice was heard for the last time, like an echo echoing from rocks. You gave up, you lost what you gained by theft, your child lives. But the curse doesn't die. Every 10 years, I will ask for your memory. You will never escape my shadow. Then, everything became quiet. The torches relit by themselves, and the hall remained deserted. Only Gyges, collapsed near the pedestal, cried with an empty soul. 𝕬𝖓𝖓 helped him to his feet. "You are still alive, and your son is alive. But you paid the ultimate price, the crown." 𝕬𝖓𝖓 placed his hand on the king's shoulder. "From now on you are no longer Gyges, king of Lydia. You are only Gyges, father of Alyattes, and perhaps that is the greatest honor." On the way back, Gyges walked with heavy steps, but with a determined heart, knew that in Sardis the throne no longer awaited him. But in the Cimmerian palace Zarephina and their son were waiting for him, knew that he had to tell the truth. To accept that power cannot be bought with unspilled blood and the silence of the tunnel, his thoughts were clear. He had lost a kingdom, but he had gained the future of his son. And that was more important than anything. Chapter 14. Renunciation of Power. The giant's tomb hall still echoed with the voice of the cursed spirit. The stone vibrated under the footsteps of the three, and the air seemed to be saturated with a dense, almost palpable energy. The light of the torches flickered, and the shadows projected on the damp walls stretched like tentacles, as if pursued by an unseen will. Gyges, his heart beating wildly, felt every fiber of his body tense. He knew that this was the decisive moment, that the life of his son Alyattes, but also the fate of the entire Lydian nation, depended on his choice, and the middle of the hall was the pedestal. 7 niches were skillfully carved in the stone, each signifying a ring of the giants. The 7th, the one that had been worn by him, was waiting to be placed in its place. The ring seemed to vibrate in Gyges' hand, as if he would be aware of what was about to happen. 𝕬𝖓𝖓 stared at him, leaning on his staff, his white beard shining in the torchlight. "Gyges, this is the moment when your soul will be judged. Every choice has consequences. Not only your power, but also the future of your son hangs in the balance." 𝕬𝖓𝖓, his gaze calm but full of gravity, added, "Choose wisely. The power you hold is not your destiny. It does not belong to you. What you keep may become the curse of those you love." Gyges gripped the ring tightly, feeling his entire life unfold before his eyes. Nights of battle, cunning, victories, and betrayals. The memory of Calion's death, his comrade, made his stomach knot. Then Zarephina's gaze, the light of his life, pierced his mind, and he felt the love that bound him to her and their son. "I cannot lose Alyattes," he whispered. "Then do what is right," 𝕬𝖓𝖓 whispered to him. Gyges felt the weight of all the kingdoms and all the people who relied on him, and yet he understood that true power lay not in control, but in sacrifice. With trembling hand, Gyges bent down and placed the ring in its socket. A white light spark spread through the dark hall. The ring seemed to melt gently into the stone. As if the stone itself accepted it, an unseen force pulled him, making him feel as if he was losing a part of himself, but also as if an immense weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The earth beneath them shook, but it was not an earthquake of the angry giant, but one that seemed to herald the approval of the spirit. The air changed, becoming lighter, purer, as if the tomb itself recognized the king's sacrifice. "You have done what many would not have had the courage to do," 𝕬𝖓𝖓 murmured. 𝕬𝖓𝖓 looked at him with a calm smile, but his eyes were bathed in seriousness. "And yet, Gyges, this is not just renunciation. It is a lesson in responsibility, in love, and in sacrifice." Gyges stood up. Raising his gaze to the vault of the hall, he felt all the corridors of the tunnel seem to gather around him. That moment, he knew that he must make a solemn oath. Raising his arm, he spoke in a loud voice. "I, Gyges, king of Lydia and father of Alyattes, swear before this place and the spirit of the giant that I renounce the power of the ring. I will no longer seek invisibility. I will no longer use its strength for personal or royal interests. I promise that any power acquired through it will never be used by me or my descendants again." The hall echoed with the echo of the oath, and Gyges felt an invisible energy cleansed his soul. Part of his burden was lifted, but he knew that the sacrifice did not end. 𝕬𝖓𝖓 was only the first step. 𝕬𝖓𝖓 bowed his head, muttering prayers to the ancient deities of the giants. May the spirit be satisfied that Gyges' wisdom and courage were true. The future of Alyattes and Lydia now depended on his choice. That moment, the hall suddenly lit up, a white gold light that penetrated every dark corner of the tunnel. The air became cleaner, lighter, as if the stone itself had breathed again. The torches rekindled by themselves, and the echo of the screams and whispers had disappeared. Gyges fell to his knees, tears streaming down his cheeks. For the first time in his life, he felt the freedom of being just a man, not a king, not a bearer of hidden powers. "Alyattes," he whispered, feeling his heart calm down. "Your child will live." 𝕬𝖍𝖏𝑜s approached, supporting him on the shoulder. "You have done what no other king would have had the courage to do. The understanding of true power lies not in control over others, but in sacrifice for those you love." 𝕬𝖏𝑜s raised his staff in blessing. "And thus, the curse is temporarily lifted. But remember, power and temptation never disappear. In every decision, you will be tested." Gyges wiped away his tears and stood up. He felt a huge weight lift from his shoulders. He was no longer the king of Lydia at that moment. He was no longer the master of the ring. But he was the father who protected his child, and a man whose soul had been cleansed of the giant's curse. On the way back, in the tunnel that now seemed less frightening, Gyges walked with determined steps. Every sound, every breath seemed more alive, more real. He thought of Zarephina, of Alyattes, of the sacrifices and losses that had brought him here. He understood that true power was not invisibility, but the courage to give up what did not belong to you. "I have won something much more precious than a kingdom or a ring," he murmured to himself. "I have won my son's future." 𝕬𝖏𝑜s and 𝕬𝖍𝖏𝑜s followed him, knowing that the real battle was not only here, in the giant's tomb, but in the world outside, where Gyges had to rebuild his life and protect the kingdom, not with the power of the ring, but with wisdom, courage, and love. Chapter 15. The Sacrifice of the Crown. Evening had fallen over the palace of Sardis with an almost sacred silence. The wind blew gently through the royal gardens, and the light of the torches reflected on the golden walls of the throne room. Inside, Zarephina stood before the empty throne, her hands clasped over her heart and her eyes filled with tears. Days had passed since Gyges had returned from the giant's tomb. His soul filled with solemn resolve. He had told her the whole truth, about the ring, about the curse, about the threat to their son, Alyattes. The silence of the hall was oppressive, and the torches flickered, as if the palace itself was holding its breath. Zarephina, the Lydian queen and mother, felt an unprecedented weight. She knew that in order to protect Alyattes' future, she had to make an unprecedented sacrifice. To give up the throne she had ruled with justice, love, and wisdom. Gyges stood before her, his gaze full of compassion and determination. "Zarephina," he said, his voice trembling, "I know how much this throne means to you. I know how much you have worked for your people, for our kingdom, for the peace we have brought together. But you must understand, the giant's curse is real. If we don't give up, Alyattes will have no chance." Zarephina looked at him deeply, feeling every word pierce her soul. Her heart was torn between her love for her son and her duty to the kingdom she ruled. "Gyges," she murmured, her voice trembling, "it is hard for me to give up what is rightfully mine, my responsibility to my people. But Alyattes is above all else. If his life depends on this sacrifice, I will make it." Gyges took her hands and squeezed them gently. "You are not alone in this. Together we will do what is right. The throne may be given up, but our love and protection for our son cannot be bought or stolen." Zarephina demanded that the ceremony of giving up the throne be a solemn one, to mark the end of one era and the beginning of another. The Lydian army, led by the 6 chosen ones and the old 𝕬𝖏𝑜s, waited in the palace courtyard. The burning torches and the waving flags brought a serious but dignified atmosphere. She wore a golden cloak, embroidered with the symbols of the Lydian kingdom, but in her eyes there was no pride, there was determination and sacrifice. Gyges squeezed her hand and whispered, "Alyattes must grow up in a safe world. This is our greatest duty as parents." Zarephina nodded, her eyes shining with tears and love. "And we will. For him." The ceremony began in front of the courtyard full of people. Zarephina climbed the throne podium, looking at the crowd. Trembling voices, sighs, and murmurs of amazement filled the air. She said goodbye to the throne and said, Lydian people, I have ruled this kingdom with all my love and duty. But now, for the protection of my son and our future, I give up power. Not because I do not deserve it, but because the life and safety of Alyattes are above any throne or kingdom. A deep silence fell. The people understood the sacrifice. Some cried secretly, others clenched their fists in respect. The words Zarephina's words resonated in their hearts, leaving an imprint of nobility and wisdom. Gyges looked at her with pride and love. Knowing that the woman next to him was not only his queen, but a true mother and leader, capable of sacrifices that exceeded any personal power or ambition. After Zarephina declared her abdication, the throne was temporarily ceded to a royal council, and Gyges, together with Pharanius and Irenaeus, began to organize the safety and protection of their son. Ardys, the son with royal Cimmerian blood, was to take over the leadership of the kingdom of Lydia, thus ensuring unity and peace between the kingdoms. Gyges felt burdened with responsibility, but also relieved that Zarephina's sacrifice had saved their son's life. That moment, he understood that true power does not lie in kingdoms or crowns, but in the ability to protect and love. The Lydian people were deeply impressed by the courage and Zarephina's wisdom. Many of the soldiers, chosen and nobles bowed in respect, recognizing that her sacrifice surpassed any military or royal glory. The stories of this day were to be passed down to future generations as an example of love, responsibility, and dedication. The people of Sardis began to shout her name with respect, Zarephina! Zarephina! Their voices, although full of emotion, also carried a clear message. Sacrifice is the greatest form of power, and the silence of the night. After the crowd dispersed, Zarephina retreated to the palace garden. Gyges followed her, and the two sat on an old bench, looking at the stars. I lost the crown, Zarephina said with a sad smile. But Alyattes is alive, and that matters more than any kingdom. Gyges took her hands in his. I lost nothing, I gained everything. Alyattes' future is assured, and our love is stronger than any power or curse. She nodded, feeling the weight of her sacrifice softened by Gyges' understanding and support, and that moment, they both realized that true greatness lies not in gold or a throne, but in choosing to protect what you love. Zarephina's relinquishment of the throne opened the way for a new era for the kingdom of Lydia. United with the Cimmerians, under the wise leadership of Ardys and the protection of the 6 chosen ones, the kingdom was ready to thrive without the corruption of power and the curse of the ring. Gyges and Zarephina now dedicated their lives to their son, Alyattes, preparing him to become a wise and brave, uninfluenced by hidden powers or immeasurable desires. That evening, under the starry sky of Lydia, Zarephina and Gyges stood together. Feeling that their sacrifice had not been in vain, they chose love and the life of their son, over power and glory. And so, the kingdom entered a period of peace, unity, and hope, and the story of their sacrifice would be told to future generations as the ultimate example of love and responsibility. Chapter 16. The Enthronement of Ardys. The morning sky was clothed in a cloak of gold and purple, and the sun's rays caressed the walls of the city of Sardis. The temple bells were ringing solemnly, calling the Lydian people to witness a historic moment, the enthronement of Ardys, the son of royal blood, the one who would become the new king of Lydia. After Zarephina and Gyges abdicated the throne, the people had been gripped by mixed emotions. Sadness for the loss of their beloved queen, but also hope for a new beginning. Ardys, raised in the shadow of intrigue, but bearer of an inherited nobility, was preparing to wear the crown, and alongside him, Selene, the maid-turned-heroine, was about to be recognized as queen. The entire palace was bustling with preparations. The nobles, the soldiers, and the common people gathered in the great courtyard, and the streets of Sardis were covered with flower petals brought from all corners of the kingdom. The Lydian priests dressed in white robes carried incense, and the singers sang ancient hymns of unity and renewal. Ardys, dressed in a white tunic with gold embroidery, was in the preparation room. With trembling hands, he looked at his face in the bronze mirror. It was not the face of a conqueror, but of a young man who understood the weight of responsibility. Behind him, Selene looked at him with eyes full of love and trust. "Ardis," she said in a gentle voice, "you are not alone. The people will follow you because they see in you what I have always seen: justice, courage, and a pure heart." He took her hand and smiled, although tears burned his eyes. "Selene, I never would have thought that a simple maid from the Cimmerian palace would be with me on this day. And yet, you are here, and without you I could not wear this crown." The throne room was full to the brim. Lydian nobles, soldiers, and commoners had gathered to see the moment when a new king was anointed. The throne, massive, carved from gold and cedar wood, was lit by torches and the rays of the sun that penetrated through colored stained glass windows. The 6 chosen ones stood aside, their faces serene, as witnesses and protectors of the new era. Gyges and Zarephina, although retired from power, were present and watched the scene with a mixture of nostalgia and pride. Alyattes, still small, stood next to his mother, holding on to her cloak, like a silent symbol of the future. The high priest of Apollo raised the golden staff, and he said, "Today, by the will of the gods and by the desire of the people, Lydia chooses a new king. Ardis, son of royal blood, come and receive the crown." Ardis slowly walked to the throne, accompanied by Selene. The murmurs of the crowd died down, and all eyes were fixed on him. When he reached the throne, he knelt and stretched out his hands to the sky. "I, Ardis, son of royal blood, swear before the Lydian people and the gods that I will rule with justice, I will defend the poor, I will honor the memory of my ancestors and bring peace to the kingdom. I will never put power above the lives of those who follow me." The priest placed the golden crown on his forehead, and the hall echoed with shouts. "Long live King Ardis! Long live our king!" After Ardis' coronation, everyone turned to Selene 𝕳𝖎. She was a surprising figure. Once a lowly servant in the Cimmerian palace, now the savior of the Lydian people through her courageous betrayal of the sorcerer Morgath and loyalty to Ardis. The priest approached and held up a silver diadem adorned with blue stones. "Selene, through your pure love and your courage, you have won the hearts of the people. From today on, you are the queen of Lydia and a pillar of light of this kingdom." When the crown was placed on her head, the crowd burst into applause and shouts of joy. Not a soul looked down on her modest origin. People knew that in her, the kingdom had a queen with a heart of gold. Sardis vibrated with celebration. The streets were filled with dancers, musicians, and sellers of wine and fresh bread. The people sang the names of Ardis and Selene, and the church bells rang out incessantly. These seemed to be the first moments of peace and joy after years of wars, betrayals, and curses. People whispered stories about how their love was predestined, about how the simple maid had become queen, and about how the young king would bring peace. And those days, their story was already turning into legend. When the crowd retreated, Ardis and Selene were left alone in the throne room. "Selene," he told her, "today I received a crown, but what I have truly won is your heart." She smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "Ardis, I have never dreamed of a throne or glory. All I wanted was to be by your side. And today the gods have given us this chance." Ardis pulled her close to him, looking at her face illuminated by the rays of the sun that penetrated through the stained glass windows. "Together we will build a Lydia stronger than ever." That evening, Gyges and Zarephina called Ardis and Selene to a secluded room. The former king looked at them with eyes full of gratitude. "Ardis, Selene, today you took on the burden that Zarephina and I chose to leave behind to save Alyattes. I entrust this people and this throne to you, not as a burden, but as a gift." Zarephina added, "You are the light that will keep away the shadows of the past. See that the old curses never touch this land again." Ardis and Selene knelt before them, receiving their blessing, and the days that followed, Ardis began to reorganize the kingdom. He strengthened his ties with the Cimmerians, ensuring peace and prosperity. Selene, as queen, took care of the lives of the common people, visiting villages, supporting widows and orphans, thus winning the unconditional love of the people. The 6 chosen ones remained in Sardis as protectors of the new royal couple, and Pharaonius watched with his wise eye, reminding them that the shadows of the past do not disappear completely, but only retreat. But for the moment, peace reigned. Sardis was no longer a city of war, but a capital of hope. The enthronement of 𝕬𝖎𝖓 and 𝕬𝖎 was not just a change of reign, but the rebirth of a kingdom. From a world torn by betrayals and curses, Lydia had emerged stronger, led by a brave king and a queen with a heart of gold. Their story would be told by bards in the markets and written on the parchments of history, the story of the young man with royal blood and the maid who had become queen. And in the hearts of the people, their names rang like a promise, 𝕬𝖎𝖓 and 𝕬𝖎, the beginning of a new era. Chapter 17. A New Beginning. The sun rose over the golden hills of Lydia, illuminating the walls of Sardis with a warm glow, like a final greeting from the kingdom to those who were leaving It and the palace courtyard, which had once been the scene of coronations and intrigues. A solemn silence now reigned. The royal carriages were ready, the Cimmerian horses, with their black manes and burning eyes, whinnied impatiently, and a few soldiers awaited the order to depart. Gyges, once king of Lydia, gathered his cloak around his shoulders, and looked out over the city that had been his home and kingdom. Beside him, Zarephina held the hand of little Alyattes, their boy, heir to the blood and curse that followed them, and in the woman's eyes there was a mixture of determination and melancholy. It was not a forced departure, but one chosen out of love for their son and for future. The promise made to the giant spirit had to be respected. Gyges had given up power, and now, together with his wife and child, he was setting out on a new path towards the Cimmerian lands, Zarephina's homeland. The crowd had gathered around the palace gates. People had come to say goodbye to the king who, despite all his sins, had protected them and led them through difficult times. Old and young, women and children, looked up at the carriage, and some even cried, "Long live Gyges! Long live Zarephina!" Voices rang out, mingling with sobs. Alyattes, looking through the velvet curtain of the carriage, waved to the people, without fully understanding what was happening. For him, the world was still a play of shadows and lights, and the departure seemed like an adventure. To the gates, 𝕬𝖎𝖓 and 𝕬𝖎 were waiting for them. The young king, with the crown on his forehead, embraced his uncle with respect and emotion. "Uncle, without you, without your sacrifice, I would not have arrived here today. I promise you that I will rule with justice and keep Lydia in peace." Gyges looked at him for a long time, with a glint of pride in his eyes. "𝕬𝖎𝖓, never forget that power is a double-edged sword. Use it for the people, not for yourself." 𝕬𝖎 squeezed Zarephina's hand. Between the two women there was a silent bond, born of pain, betrayals, and sacrifices. "Go well," 𝕬𝖎 whispered. "Cimmeria needs you, just as Lydia needs us." With these last words, the carriages set off, and the crowd parted like a raging sea, letting them pass. The road was long and dangerous, crossing dark forests, endless plains, and mist-covered mountains. However, with the 6 chosen ones and the old 𝕬𝖓𝖓, the journey took on the air of a pilgrimage. It was as if each step took them away from the shadows of the past and closer to a new destiny. Along the way, 𝕬𝖓𝖓 told them about the Cimmerian lands, their ancient history, and the legends that intertwined with Lydia's. "The Cimmerians are a people of warriors," the old man said. "But they also have stories about giants, about curses and hidden rings. Perhaps there you will find the peace that you have lost here." Gyges listened in silence. He felt how each word of the old man weighed on him, reminding him of the oaths taken and the mistakes of the past. Zarephina, on the other hand, seemed to gain strength as they approached their native lands. Her eyes sparkled differently, and her smile was more certain. "There," she said, "among my people, Alyattes will be safe. We will start again, far from intrigues and curses." Traveling for days, Gyges let his thoughts carry him away. He remembered the moments of glory, when he had raised his sword to defend Lydia, remembered the face of Caoline, the lost friend, the blood spilled on the battlefields, and the cries of victory that now seemed in vain. But the most oppressive was the face of Queen Pyrrhusane, the woman he had left to her fate, no matter how hard he tried to justify his actions. Guilt followed him, and in Zarephina's eyes he had found forgiveness, but deep down he knew that the past could not be erased. Therefore, the retreat to Cimmeria was not only an escape from the curse, but also a search for atonement. After weeks of travel, the gray walls of the Cimmerian capital rose in the distance. Unlike the shining Sardis, the city had a stern air, with black towers and massive gates. But for Zarephina, it was a familiar place, full of childhood memories, the gates. The captain who had been loyal to her since early childhood greeted them with respect. "My mistress, the Queen of Cimmeria, awaits you with an empty throne, but a people hungry for justice. King 𝕷𝖵𝖗𝖉 has been lost, but you are his blood." Zarephina enters the city with her head held high, and the people acclaim her, recognizing her as the legitimate heir. Next to her, Gyges, although without a crown, was regarded with respect. The Cimmerian palace was cold and austere, but that day it was filled with light. The local priests and nobles recognized Zarephina as queen, and Alyattes was introduced as crown prince. Gyges felt like a stranger in that place. But looking at his wife and child, he felt peace for the first time in a long time. Was no longer king, he no longer wore the cursed ring, he no longer had to carry burdens that did not belong to him, was just a man protecting his family. That night, after simple ceremonies, Zarephina stood beside him on the balcony of the palace, looking at the stars. "Gyges," she said to him, "do you know what I feel? That we are finally free. Not completely, because the curse still haunts us, but here we can start again." Gyges hugged her and whispered, "For you and for Alyattes, I can be anything. Husband, father, even a mere mortal. I do not need thrones or rings." Zarephina smiled. "Then our destiny is only now beginning." The retreat of Gyges and Zarephina to Cimmeria was not an end, but a rebirth. While Ardys and Selene led Lydia to Sardis, they were opening a new path, away from the glory and burden of power. Cimmeria, with its cold walls and its stubborn people, became the scene of another chapter, where love, sacrifice, and hope would once again weave the thread of destiny, and little Alyattes, looking at the world with his clear eyes, was the living promise that the future would be written not by curse, but by the courage and choices of his parents. Chapter 18. The Abduction of 𝕷𝖵𝖗𝖉. Night had fallen over the Cimmerian lands like a heavy sheet, stretched across the mountains and forests and the royal citadel. Torches flickered on the walls, and the air smelled of burning resin and unrest. The Cimmerians were a vigorous and suspicious people, accustomed to fighting and the darkness. King 𝕷𝖵𝖗𝖉, weakened by wounds and years, sat in a secluded room on the highest floor of the palace. Around him were only a few loyal servants and a handful of guards. His face bore the marks of a warrior's life, but his eyes were shadowed by the betrayal of his own daughter, whom he had given into the hands of an enemy. Although he loved his daughter, anger still burned in his soul. Yet, beyond this smoldering anger, 𝕷𝖵𝖗𝖉 knew that the greatest danger was not Gyges, but Morgath, the sorcerer who had visited him in secret and promised him power. Morgath had not been seen in the city for a long time, and some thought he had fled. But 𝕷𝖵𝖗𝖉, who knew him, felt that he had never truly left. That night, the guards guarding the stairs thought they saw a long shadow creeping along the walls. A cold shiver passed over their skin, as if a black wind had descended from the forest. The guard dogs began to howl, and the horses in the stables bumped against the walls, sensing what men could not. The wizard wore a thick cloak, and his eyes, red as embers, burned in the darkness, used the power of shadows. Passing invisibly among the guards and servants, like a ghost, he no longer needed the liquor he had prepared with 𝕷𝖵𝖗𝖉, for he himself had learned to merge with the darkness. When he reached the king's chamber, he paused for a moment and raised his hands, muttering formulas in an ancient, unknown language. The flames of the torches flickered madly, then went out, leaving the room plunged into darkness. The king, awakened by the sudden cold, stood up and grabbed the sword by the bed. "Who is there?" he shouted, his voice hoarse but determined. From the darkness, Morgath's voice sounded like a snake's hiss. "Your friend of old, great king. The one who promised you that you would regain what you had lost." 𝕷𝖵𝖗𝖉 frowned. "Morgath, do you dare come here, to my palace, like a thief?" The wizard stepped forward, and his figure began to take shape in the shadows. "Not as a thief, but as a liberator. You were betrayed by your daughter, who gave her heart to the enemy. She stole your crown and brought Gyges, the one who stained your blood, to your city. I am the only one who can save you. Save? The king laughed bitterly. You do not seek to save, Morgath. You seek power for yourself. The wizard's eyes narrowed. You are right, 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌. Power is what I seek, but not just for me. I offer you a chance to regain it too. Come with me, and together we will break the alliance between Cimmeria and Lydia. 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌 was silent for a moment. He was a proud man, but also desperate, knew that the throne had slipped away from him, that the people were beginning to look to Zarephina as their true queen. But his hatred for Gyges and his desire for revenge made him vulnerable. "And if I refuse?" he asked, his hand on his sword. Morgath smiled coldly. "Then you will not see the sunrise." That moment, the king's personal guard entered the room, alerted by the noises. But the wizard raised his hand and spoke a sharp word. A green flame burst out, throwing the soldiers to the ground. The walls trembled, and the windows closed as if by magic. 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌 tried to strike, but his sword stuck in the air as if in an invisible stone. Morgath curled his fingers around his neck and whispered, "The choice is no longer yours." A whirlwind of darkness formed around them, lifting them from the ground. The king struggled, but he was caught as if in an invisible net. In a few moments, their bodies faded, turning into smoke and disappearing through the walls. When the torchlight came back on, the room was empty. Only 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌's sword lay on the floor, like a testimony of the short and helpless struggle and the morning. When Zarephina entered her father's room, she found the servants weeping and the guard on their knees, ashamed of their helplessness. "Your Majesty, the king, has been taken," said the captain, in a trembling voice. Zarephina felt the ground crumble beneath her feet. Although her father had hated her for the choice she had made, it was still her blood that had given him life. Gyges, alerted by the cries from the palace, came rushing in. Seeing 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌's sword on the floor and the burn marks on the walls, he understood immediately. "Morgath," he whispered. Only he could do this. The old Feranius, also present, shook his head gravely. The sorcerer now has a valuable hostage. With King 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌 in his hands, he can claim not only the throne of Cimmeria, but also of Lydia. Zarephina clenched her fists, and her eyes filled with tears. "We must find him. He is my father, no matter how much he hated me." Gyges took her in his arms. "We will find him, but we must be prepared. Morgath is not only a kidnapper, but also a strategist. He will set traps for us and the forests of 𝕳𝖓𝖌. Far from the eyes of men, Morgath carried his prisoner. King 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌 was bound with heavy chains, but his eyes still burned with the fire of pride. "You will not go unpunished," he said. "My people will hunt you, and my daughter will face you." Morgath laughed, a hollow laugh that echoed like an evil echo through the forests. "Your daughter?" "Zarephina is weak, blinded by love. Gyges is a madman who has lost his kingdom. The only one who matters is their child, Alyattes. And believe me, my king, I have big plans for him." 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌 felt a cold shiver. It was no longer just about revenge or power. The sorcerer had a much darker purpose, linked to the giant's curse and the hidden ring as the shadows of the forest gathered around them. The king understood that he had been caught in a larger web than he could have ever imagined. 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌's kidnapping was not only a blow against Cimmeria, but also the beginning of a new evil plan by Morgath. With the king's disappearance, the fragile balance between the kingdoms was shaken to its foundations, and Zarephina and Gyges were thrust into an even greater struggle, not only for her father's freedom, but also for the future of their son. The sorcerer's shadow stretched now upon both kingdoms, and the giant's curse seemed closer than ever to demanding its sacrifice. Chapter 19. Zarephina's Coronation. The morning sun rose over the walls of the Cimmerian city, casting its rays over the old towers and over the flags tattered by the winds of war. However, the city was immersed in oppressive silence. The disappearance of King 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌, kidnapped by Morgath, had left the people in anxiety and fear. The nobles whispered among themselves, and the soldiers, although still standing at their posts, seemed deprived of the security that their king once inspired, and in the midst of this confusion, a strong voice rose, that of the old 𝕊𝖓𝖗 in the great square of the city. He spoke to the people, proclaiming what had become inevitable. Cimmerians, people of the mountain and the sword, your king was torn from our midst by the dark hand of Morgath. But the throne cannot remain empty. The blood of 𝕊𝖓𝖗𝖉 lives in his daughter Zarephina, and only she can now rule the kingdom. Murmurs rose like a storm among the people. Some agreed, others hesitated, remembering her alliance with Gyges, the Lydian king. To many Cimmerians, Gyges was an intruder, a conqueror who had stolen their princess. But to others, Zarephina was the hope of unity, the only one capable of holding the kingdom upright against Morgath's magic. Zarephina, though overwhelmed with grief for her father's abduction, accepted 𝕊𝖓𝖗's proposal. She knew that her people needed a leader, and the lack of clear authority would invite chaos. In the great hall of the palace, the priests and elders gathered to organize the coronation ceremony. They had taken from the royal coffers the ancient garments of the Cimmerian queens, a cloak of heavy cloth, embroidered with gold and silver threads, which symbolized the connection between the mountains and the sky. The crown, a circle of wrought iron set with green jade stones, had been worn by 𝕊𝖓𝖗𝖉's mother and was now prepared for his daughter. Gyges watched everything with a mixture of pride and anxiety, knew that for many of the Cimmerian nobles, he remained a stranger. His presence at the coronation could be seen as a provocation. However, Zarephina had insisted that he stand by her side, confessing by this gesture that he would never hide their love and their marriage. On the appointed day, the entire city gathered around the ancient temple of the Cimmerian gods, carved into the rock on the outskirts of the city. The procession began with the sounds of horns and drums, and Zarephina stepped forward, wearing a dress as white as snow. Above her head, the maids held a red canopy, symbol of the sacred fire of Cimmeria. The people watched attentively, and all eyes were fixed on her. Some looked at her with admiration, seeing in her the beauty and determination of her mother, who had died long ago. Others looked at her with suspicion, fearing that once she was queen, Gyges would seize the throne. Zarephina, however, walked with her head held high. A mixture of fear and courage burned in her heart, but she did not let anything cloud her gait. She remembered the words of her father, spoken long ago. A ruler is never afraid in front of the people, even if he trembles within himself. Arriving at the temple, she knelt before the altar, where the eternal flame burned. The high priest raised his hands and spoke solemn words. Zarephina, daughter of 𝕊𝖓𝖗𝖉, you are called by the gods to you were the crown of Cimmeria. You swear by your blood and by the land that gave birth to you that you will defend your people, that you will preserve your traditions, and that you will face the darkness that rises against us. Zarephina looked up, and her voice rang out clearly. I swear by my blood and my life, I will not leave Cimmeria prey to sorcerers and traitors. I will be a shield for my people and a sword against their enemies. The murmur of the crowd turned into a wave of shouts. Some cheered, others grumbled, but the solemnity of the oath could not be denied. The high priest raised the crown of iron and jade and, with slow gestures, placed it on Zarephina's forehead. That moment, the drums sounded again, and the priests threw white flowers over the crowd. Rise before your queen, shouted 𝕊𝖓𝖗𝖉. From this hour, Zarephina, daughter of 𝕊𝖓𝖗𝖉, is queen of Cimmeria. The crowd burst into shouts, Queen! Our queen! Although some hesitated, most were overcome with enthusiasm, for the people, however stubborn, felt the need for a leader. Zarephina raised her hand, and her voice was heard loudly. People of Cimmeria, I know that some of you look at me with suspicion. But know that I will not be the queen of Gyges, but your queen, of those born in the mountains and valleys. My father is the prisoner of the sorcerer Morgath, and I swear that I will not rest until I bring him back. The crowd erupted in a wave of applause, and for the first time, people's faces lit up. Among the nobility, reactions were divided. Some clapped enthusiastically, recognizing her courage and strength. Others pursed their lips, uneasy at the presence of Gyges near them. Several noble families were already conspiring in secret, wondering if the new queen could be a weakness or a danger. But the common people, those who had suffered the most from the wars, and the sorcerers looked at her with hope. For them, Zarephina was a bridge between two worlds, the heiress of Cimmerian blood, but also the wife of the Lydian king, the one who could bring peace and abundance. And the evening, after the coronation, a feast was held in the royal palace. The table was laden with wine, meat, and fruit, but the atmosphere was tense. Zarephina, seated on the throne, felt the burden of the crown on her forehead. Tea was not just a metal ornament, but a burden as heavy as stone. Gyges whispered in her ear, "You have won their hearts, but you have also aroused fears. You will have to be stronger than ever." Zarephina looked at him with moist eyes. "I did not accept this for myself, Gyges, but for my father and our son. If Morgath tries to divide us, we must show him that we will not give in." 𝕬𝖓𝖍, who was standing nearby, leaned towards her. "My queen, you must understand. Your coronation is not just a ceremony, but the beginning of a struggle. Morgath will use the king's kidnapping as a weapon. He will test your faith. He will try to sow distrust between you and your people. But if you remain steadfast, you will win." Late at night, when the feast ended, Zarephina was left alone in the throne room. She took off her crown and held it in her hands, looking at the green stones that shone in the torchlight. In them she seemed to see the face of her father, harsh and unyielding. "Father, if you were here, would you recognize me? Or would you say I sold myself to Lydia?" Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she quickly wiped them away. The queen could not cry in front of anyone. Deep down, she knew that she was no longer just the daughter of 𝕳𝖍𝖉𝖊𝖓 or the wife of Gyges. She was the queen of Cimmeria, the bond between two peoples and the last barrier to Morgath's darkness. Zarephina's coronation was not just a ceremonial act, but a crucial moment in the history of Cimmeria. The people, divided between fear and hope, had found a new leader. But with the crown, Zarephina also received the burden of the wars to come, the conspiracies of the nobles, and the threat of Morgath. Her journey had only just begun, and the throne she had sat on was built on thorns, not gold. Chapter 20. The 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓 Army. The Cimmerian citadel still vibrated after Zarephina's coronation, but beneath the glow of the celebration lay a grim truth. King 𝕳𝖍𝖉𝖓 was still the prisoner of the sorcerer Morgath, and no one knew where he had been taken. His shadow hung over the people, and the new queen knew that her throne would never be secure until her father was rescued. One gray morning, Gyges, with a stern look and heavy thoughts, entered the throne room. Behind him walked the 5 newly chosen ones and 𝕳𝖍𝖉𝖗 the wise, who had always stood by King Gyges, 𝕳𝖎𝖉 the fearless, 𝕳𝖎𝖉 the archer, Philias the warrior, Thamyris the bard, and Iasos the swift of foot. Each bore the scars of past battles, but also the determination to follow their king wherever fate would take them. "Zarephina," Gyges said, his voice deep, "we cannot wait. Morgath hides in the forests of 𝕳𝖉𝖉, where shadows are thicker than light. If 𝕳𝖍𝖉𝖗 still lives, only we can bring him back." The queen looked at him with tired but determined eyes. "I will go with you, Gyges," said Queen Zarephina. "He is my father, and my people must see that we will not leave them prey to the darkness. But remember, now you are not just the king of Lydia, but the husband of the queen of Cimmeria. You must win their trust with the sword, not just with your heart." Gyges went out into the large square, where the Cimmerian chieftains had already gathered the men eager for battle. Hundreds of villagers, foresters, and former soldiers of 𝕳𝖍𝖉𝖗 had gathered with their rudimentary weapons, axes, spears, bows. In their midst, a white flag with the black wolf of Cimmeria fluttered in the wind. Gyges raised his hand, and silence fell. "People of Cimmeria," he shouted, "the sorcerer Morgath has kidnapped your king, the father of your queen, is hidden in the forests of 𝕳𝖉𝖉, where shadows reign. But together we will snatch your king from the clutches of darkness. Who will rise with me?" A battle cry shook the square. The men slammed their shields and spears on the ground, shouting the name of 𝕳𝖍𝖉𝖗 and the queen. That hour, a new army was born, the 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓 army, a mixture of Lydians, Cimmerians, and common people, united by the same cause. On the morning of their departure, the sky was covered with heavy clouds. The army set off in column, with the 6 chosen ones at the head and Gyges riding his black stallion, wearing the shining Lydian helmet. Next to him walked 𝕬𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓, who supported his staff engraved with forgotten symbols. Zarephina, with Alyattes in her arms, watched them from the walls of the city. Her heart was breaking between hope and fear. She knew that if Gyges did not return, the kingdom and her family would collapse into a bottomless pit. However, she let him go, with the same determination with which she had always loved him. The drums sounded, and the flags fluttered in the wind. The 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓 army was leaving the fortress, carrying in their hearts the desire for revenge and salvation. The first days of the march were peaceful. The army passed through villages that welcomed them with bread, salt, and wine. The people they watched them with hope, for the news of Zarephina's coronation and the raising of the army had already reached far away. But as they approached the forests of 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖊, the atmosphere changed. The sky seemed ever darker, even at noon, and the winds brought strange whispers. The forests rose like black walls, with huge trunks and tangled branches that hid the sunlight. 𝕬𝖉𝖊𝖈 often walked ahead, feeling the air with his staff and whispering protective incantations. "Morgath has already touched these forests," he said. "I feel traces of black magic in every leaf, in every stone." The soldiers, though brave, were drawing their shields closer. Many made the ancient sign of the wolf to keep the spirits at bay. The chosen 6. Each of the 6 took on a role in this expedition. 𝕬𝖉𝖊𝖈, the wise, watched for unseen signs and tried to guess Morgath's steps. 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖓, the axe-wielding giant, organized the battle formations and taught the common people how to wield weapons. 𝕳𝖎𝖉, the archer, guarded the edges of the forest and made sure no one strayed. 𝕬𝖎𝖓, the experienced soldier, trained the new recruits and raised their morale with tales of bravery. 𝕳𝖎𝖓, the bard, sang about their past battles by the fire in the evening, reminding the people that they were part of a legend. 𝕬𝖎𝖓, the swift-footed, was the messenger, running back and forth to bring news and scout the terrain. Gyges watched them and felt a wave of gratitude. To the edge of the forest, people discovered the first traces of evil. Torn deer, half-burnt trees, and springs poisoned with ash. No one dared to drink water from the rivers that flowed through those places. One night, the guards swore that they saw huge shadows moving among the trees, although no trace had been found in the morning. "It's not just rumors," 𝕬𝖉𝖊𝖈 said. "Morgath sends ghosts to weaken us. We must keep our minds clear, or we will perish before we can take up arms." Gyges knew he could not march into the forests with a disorganized 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖊 every day. After they stopped, he had the soldiers practice. 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖓 showed them how to form the shield wall, 𝕳𝖎𝖉 taught them archery, and 𝕬𝖉𝖓 explained simple tactics. "If we are to face Morgath and return alive, we must be one beast," Gyges said one evening. "Not 100 separate arms, but a single-edged sword." The people listened, and slowly the army transformed from a gathering of villagers into a disciplined army. On the 7th day, the host of 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖓 stepped into the heart of the forests. The sunlight was almost completely extinguished, and a permanent shadow settled under the dense foliage. The air was thick, smelling of mold and old smoke. Gyges raised his sword and said, "From now on, we are no longer in the world of men. Morgath lurks at every step. But remember, we are children of the light, and the shadows fear us." A murmur of determination ran through the ranks of the soldiers. The drums ceased, and only the sound of footsteps and the rustling of dry leaves echoed, and that moment, the 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖊 army became not just an army, but a walking legend. And the depths of the forests, the sorcerer Morgath awaited them, with powers grown from the darkness. But Gyges, the chosen 6, and their army were ready to face even death, for the king and for honor. This chapter marks the beginning of the expedition of Gyges and the chosen 6 alongside the new army. The 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖊 army is a stage of preparation and entry into the heart of danger, where the magic of Morgath begins to make its presence felt, in contrast to the celebrations and coronations so far. The tone becomes gloomy and tense, a sign that decisive confrontations are to come. Chapter 21. The Shadows of the Forest. In the forests of 𝕳𝖉𝖶, night was indistinguishable from day. The shadows were so thick that the sun seemed a forgotten star, unable to pierce the rain of darkness with its rays. The air was cold and damp, and the tree trunks rose like the crooked columns of an ancient temple covered with moss and vines. Every time the army's footsteps approached the depths, the forest seemed to whisper, and the rustling of the leaves brought with it an unsettling echo. The army of 𝕳𝖉𝖶 marched forward in silence, each man with his hand on his weapon and his eyes raised to the dark branches. Gyges and the 6 chosen ones led the way, but even they could read the worry on their faces. What they had encountered so far had been only the prelude. Before them, the true traps of the wizard Morgath. They waited. The first night in the forest brought a treacherous temptation. When the campfires were lit, many soldiers swore that, at the edge of the light, they saw their lost wives, children, or parents. A young Cimmerian soldier called out for his mother and fled into the darkness. Gyges tried to stop him, but his body disappeared into the wave of shadows, and in the morning they found him dead, his eyes wide open and his face contorted with horror. 𝕳𝖉𝖶 raised his staff and said, "These are the illusions of Morgath. He knows how to reach the deepest desires and fears. From now on, no one should desert the ranks, no matter how sweet the call." Gyges looked over the army and added in a loud voice, "Whoever deserts the ranks dies. Not by our sword, but by the darkness. Stay united." But even with these warnings, every night the shadows sought to lure them. There was the laughter of children, songs from their villages, the voices of loved ones lost in wars. The army bit their lips and clutched their shields, but fear grew in the chest of each one, and the Cimmerian fortress, Zarephina, also lived under the same curse in the late nights, as she watched over her son, Alyattes, asleep in his cradle. A voice began to call out to her. It was the voice of her father, 𝕳𝖉𝖶. "Zarephina, my daughter, come to me. Morgath holds me in chains." The voice seemed to come from over the walls, from the forests, from the mountains. Sometimes it echoed in dreams, sometimes even when she was awake. Zarephina started, feeling torn between love for her child and the call of blood point one night. The voice was so clear that she got up from the bed, her eyes moist. "Father, where are you?" The shadow on the wall moved, outlining 𝕳𝖉𝖶's face. "I am in the hands of Morgath. Every moment hurts me. If you love me, come." Zarephina felt her heart would give out. But at the same time, she suspected it was a trap. She knew that Morgath could twist her memories and use her weaknesses. However, her father's voice was so vivid that the tears could not be stopped, and the forest, Gyges and the army encountered more and more traces of black magic point one day. When they tried to cross a clearing, the earth itself opened up and swallowed several soldiers, as if it were quicksand. Their screams disappeared into the abyss below, without anyone being able to save them. 𝕳𝖉𝖶 stuck his axe into the ground and muttered, "The forest is not alive, it is possessed. Morgath controls it." 𝕳𝖉𝖶 raised his staff and he drew lines of fire on the ground, trying to seal the cracks. "We are in the heart of his spell," he said. "But we must not stop. If we are afraid, he has won." The army moved forward, but each step was harder than the one before. The darkness was no longer just their enemy, it seemed to suck their strength. At the same time, Zarephina felt her father's voice grow louder. Sometimes, as she held her son to her chest, her heart would beat wildly and images of chains, caves and flames would come to her mind. It was as if a part of her soul was bound to 𝕳𝖉𝖶's. Pharaonius, the wise old man, found her crying one night. "My queen, do not cry. Morgath seeks to weaken you." "But he is my father," she shouted. "I hear him. I feel him. It can't just be an illusion." Pharaonius sighed. "Sometimes, Morgath mixes truth with lies. Maybe 𝕳𝖉𝖶 really is calling you. But the more you answer, the more Morgath will steal your soul." Zarephina understood the danger, but how could she ignore the voice of the one who had given her life? Another night, the forest turned into hell. The 𝕳𝖉𝖉 army was attacked not by soldiers, but by fire. Blue flames ignited out of nowhere, running along the branches of the trees, forming hideous faces that shouted the names of the soldiers. "Run, son!" They stretched out their arms, like lost fathers. Many soldiers threw down their weapons and ran towards the flames, convinced that they saw their family. Gyges shouted with all his might, "It's a lie! Hold your shields!" But 7 men fell to the flames, and in the morning nothing remained of their bodies but ashes. Irenaeus, his forehead sweating, said, "This is only the beginning. Morgath will test us until only the strongest remain." Gyges felt his men weakened by each trap. He knew he could not continue like this, and in evening gathering, he spoke to them. "Host of 𝕳𝖉𝖉, listen carefully. We did not set out to flee from shadows. We set out to save King 𝕳𝖉𝖗𝖉 and to avenge Morgath. If we die, let us die with swords in hand, not blinded by his illusions." Murmur of determination rose. 𝕳𝖉𝖉 struck his shield, 𝕳𝖎𝖉 raised his bow, and the bard 𝕳𝖉𝖉 sang a melody that recalled the battles of old. The morale of the army rose, even for a moment. That same evening, in the Cimmerian fortress, Zarephina dreamed again. She saw 𝕳𝖉𝖗𝖉 chained, his eyes full of pain. "My daughter," he said, "Gyges and his army will not succeed. Only you can save me. Come alone, with the ring." Zarephina flinched, knowing that the ring was no longer theirs, that it had been left in the giant's socket. But her father's voice sounded so desperate that it tore her apart. When she woke up, she looked at her sleeping son and whispered, "Is this the truth, or just another trick of Morgath?" The darkness did not answer her, but a seed of doubt sprouted in her soul. Chapter 22. The Battle in the Depths. The road through the forests of 𝕳𝖉𝖉 had become an uninterrupted series of trials, but what awaited the army beyond the curtain of shadows exceeded anything they could have imagined. Before them, the earth opened into a wide chasm, like a wound dug by the hand of time. From its depths rose heavy steam, a mixture of sulphur and smoke, like a dark breath from the underworld. Gyges, riding his black stallion, looked at the abyss with a frown. Beside him, the 5 chosen ones and the wise Irenaeus waited. With bated breath, the bard 𝕳𝖉𝖉, the one who a few evenings ago had managed to break the illusions of the sorcerer with a song of light, felt cold shivers along his spine. "Here is the entrance," said Irenaeus. "Morgath sent his army beyond the abyss. Those we will face are no longer men, but servants of the shadows." Gyges took a deep breath and raised his sword. "Then we will descend." The army tied themselves with ropes and ladders, and the torches burned weakly, barely dispersing the mist. The deeper they descended, the heavier the silence became. No birds, no rustling of leaves, only the dull roar of the abyss. Finally, their feet touched the ground, a wet stone, cold as ice, that seemed to pulse under their feet. Ahead, a dark gallery opened, like the mouth of a monster. From it came barely perceptible sounds, whispers, whimpers, cries mixed with a faint laughter. 𝕳𝖉𝖉, with his axe on shoulder, he muttered, "If hell has a road, this is it." As they advanced, the shadows began to gather. First, they seemed simple silhouettes, outlines of black smoke that dripped down the walls. But soon their forms solidified. They had skeletal bodies, empty eyes and long arms, sharp as sickles. 𝕳𝖉𝖉 recognized the voices. They were the voices of those lost in the forest, soldiers who had been deceived by illusions. "They are their souls," the bard whispered. Morgath bound them and turned them into weapons. A wave of beings fell upon them. Gyges' sword shone in the darkness, cutting off the first 2 shadows that had rushed at him. But when the blade pierced them, their bodies did not fall like men, but shattered in black smoke, leaving a scream that shook the mind. 𝕳𝖎𝖗, the archer of the 6, launched fiery arrows, and each arrow ignited the shadows like a rag soaked in tar. 𝕳𝖉𝖉, the giant with the axe, crushed the dark beings with heavy blows, causing them to collapse in waves of ash. But the shadows did not stop from the walls of the gallery. From the ceiling and even from the ground, wave after wave rose, each more numerous than the one before. When the army began to overwhelm, 𝕳𝖎𝖉 raised her lyre and sang an ancient song. The strings vibrated like rays of light, and their sound poured into the depths, crashing against the shadows like a storm. Many of the enemies staggered, withered and shattered. Unable to withstand the harmony, Gyges turned to the bard. "Do not stop, 𝕳𝖎𝖉. Your voice is our unseen sword." The bard sang until blood spurted from his lips, but he continued, knowing that without him no one would have survived. Beyond the bloody battle, Morgath had prepared a greater trap. From the depths of the gallery, a thunderclap resounded and a stone gate opened, revealing an altar lit by green flames. On the altar, bound in chains, stood King 𝕳𝖓𝖗𝖉 himself. "My daughter, Zarephina, help me!" The voice echoed through everyone's minds, but especially in Gyges' heart. The soldiers stopped for a moment, stunned. But 𝕳𝖓𝖗𝖉 raised his staff and shouted, "Do not be deceived. This is only another mask of the shadows." And yet, the image of the king was so vivid that many believed it was real. Gyges felt his soul torn between the desire to save his father-in-law and the suspicion that everything was a farce. That moment, the shadows transformed. They were no longer simple skeletal creatures, but took on the faces of those dear to each soldier: mothers, wives, brothers, children. One of the Cimmerians saw his son lost in the wars and lowered his shield, only to be pierced by the claws of the shadow. "Father," the figure whispered before it shattered. Then Gyges raised his sword and shouted, "Do not look at their faces anymore. They are only illusions. Morgath feeds on our love and turns it against us. Keep your eyes closed if you must, but fight." His words came to life. The army gathered, and with shields clasped, weapons raised, they threw themselves into the dark wave. Blood and smoke filled the gallery, and the screams of the shadows intertwined with the battle cries of the people. 𝕽𝖎𝖓𝖏, covered in blood and smoke, made his way through the waves, while 𝕳𝖎𝖉 and the others threw arrows and spears into the green fires. The fury of the shadows became unstoppable. Then 𝕳𝖓𝖗𝖉, in a loud voice, intoned an incantation. His staff ignited and burst into a white light that split the earth. Chasm opened in the middle of the gallery, and dozens of shadows were pulled into the fiery abyss. But part of the army also fell. Their cries were heard for a long time, until the depths swallowed their voices. Gyges approached 𝕳𝖓𝖗𝖉. "We will lose all the army if we do not quickly leave this place." The wise man answered him with a heavy look. "That is so, but this battle had to be fought. If the shadows remained unconquered, they would have ended up desecrating the city of Cimmeria." After hours of fighting, the last shadows were scattered by the song of 𝕳𝖓𝖉 and the fire of 𝕳𝖎𝖃's arrows. Silence fell again in the depths, but it was a bitter silence, because over half the army lay dead. Gyges looked at the fallen bodies, and his heart broke. "This is not victory," he said, "it's just the beginning. Morgath has shown us what he can do." 𝕳𝖓𝖗𝖉 nodded. "Yes, Gyges, and he hasn't played all his cards yet." People were gathering the bodies of their comrades and burning them on stone pyres, so as not to let their souls be stolen by the shadows. The flames lit up the weary and determined faces of those who remained alive. 𝕳𝖓𝖉, her fingers bleeding from the strings of her lyre, sang a mournful ballad, and her song rang out like a prayer. Gyges raised his sword to the stone vault and swore, "Morgath will pay for every life he took from us." Chapter 23. The Fate of 𝕳𝖓𝖗𝖉. The shadow gallery was now deserted, but the air still echoed with the screams and songs that had filled it with death and smoke. The torches flickered feebly, and Gyges' army, reduced to half, walked among the bodies of their comrades burned at the stake. Zarephina walked in the lead, pale and silent. She had lost men who had sworn allegiance to her, and yet her thoughts never left her father, whom Morgath held hostage somewhere in these depths. A faint murmur, like a broken breath, was heard from a side gallery. Gyges raised his hand and signaled the soldiers to remain silent. 𝕳𝖓𝖉, with her lyre slung over her back, and 𝕽𝖎𝖓𝖏, with his axe in his hand, led the way. With each step, the voice became clearer, a mixture of prayer and curse. "Help me, Zarephina, my daughter!" The princess's heart shuddered. Without waiting any longer, she ran down the corridor, and Gyges hurried after her, calling her name. A small hall, carved into the rock, the greenish light of strange flames revealed the silhouette of a man bound in thick chains, supported by a stone altar. His hair was white, his face furrowed with suffering, and his eyes sparkled with a sickly 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓 was King 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉, but his appearance was changed. His skin was gray, black veins were drawn on his neck and arms, and his lips were cracked. Zarephina fell to her knees next to him, taking his cold hands in hers. "Father, it is I, your daughter. I have come to get you out of here." 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 blinked hard, and his voice echoed like a hiss. "Zarephina, you still have the courage to look at me? You turned your back on me, you gave your heart to the enemy, and yet the blood cannot be untied." Gyges approached, aware of his father-in-law's gaze full of hatred and suffering. "King 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉, this is no time for reproaches. Morgath used you, bound you with his curse. We will find a way to break it." The old man laughed briefly, a hoarse and bitter laugh. "The curse does not break. It feeds on my life. Every moment lived is a drop given to the shadows." 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖓 raised his axe to cut the chains, but 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖗 stopped him with a gesture. "Be careful. They are not ordinary iron chains. They are made of black magic. One wrong blow and the curse will tear his body apart." Zarephina looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Then how can we save him?" The sage approached and touched the chains with his staff. The metal heated up and a scream was heard that did not come from 𝕳𝖉𝖗's chest, but from the cursed bond itself. "There is a way," said 𝕳𝖉𝖗, "but it demands a price. Someone must take on a part of the curse, so that he can live." Everyone fell silent. Zarephina looked up, determined. "Then I will take the curse. He is my father." Gyges grabbed her arm, his gaze burning. "No. You are the Queen of Cimmeria, the mother of Alyattes. I cannot let you lose your soul for this." But 𝕳𝖉𝖗, with a bitter smile, whispered, "Perhaps that would be right, and why daughter should feel the burden that her choice has brought me." Zarephina burst into tears. "Father, don't say that." 𝕳𝖉𝖗 raised his staff and drew a circle of light around the altar. The torches flickered brighter, and the shadows on the walls moved like living beings. "Gyges," he said, "the choice is yours. The curse cannot be broken, but it can be carried by someone else. Either the daughter, or the husband, or me, if you let me." Gyges felt the weight of the world crashing down on his shoulders. He looked at his wife, pale and determined, and at his old father-in-law, who, although he despised him, was blood for Zarephina. "I will take him," said Gyges. "My son needs a pure mother and a father who will bear the cross. If this is fate, then let it be mine." 𝕳𝖉𝖗 looked at him respectfully and began the incantation. The chains turned red, and the green flames rose. A cloud of black smoke rose from 𝕳𝖉𝖗's chest and headed for Gyges. The Lydian king staggered, feeling the venom of darkness seep into his veins. His eyes darkened for a moment, but he kept his fist clenched on his sword. "You will not strike me down, ever." With a loud cry, Gyges cursed him, and the chains shattered into thousands of shards of light. 𝕳𝖉𝖗 collapsed to the floor, breathing heavily but freely. Zarephina hugged him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Father, you are saved." But 𝕳𝖉𝖗 looked at her with troubled eyes, in which a red flame still smoldered. "I am not saved. The curse has not disappeared. It has only moved." Gyges held his chest with his hand, feeling the burning of the shadows. He stood up, with heavy steps, but with a determined voice. "I carry it now, and as long as I live, it will not touch anyone else." The army looked at him with fear. Even the 6 chosen ones murmured among themselves, wondering if their king would not eventually become a weapon of the sorcerer. 𝕳𝖉𝖗 reassured them. "Gyges has a strong soul, but the curse will test him. Every dream, every dark thought will be its food. We must be vigilant." Zarephina squeezed Gyges' hand, determined not to leave him alone. "You will not bear this burden alone, my husband. I will be by your side, even if darkness envelopes us." 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌, carried by his soldiers, looked like a man who had aged 20 years in a single day. But his gaze, though weakened, still burned with the pride of a king. "I will return to Cimmeria," he said in a low voice. "Why, people must know that I live, even if the shadow pursues me." Zarephina tried to convince him to remain under the protection of Gyges and the chosen ones, but her father shook his head. "No, my daughter, I am the king of Cimmeria. Even marked, even weakened, my duty is there. If I fall, then let me fall among my people." Gyges looked at him and understood. True kings did not flee fate, but embraced it. With heavy steps, the army left the cursed gallery. Each man carried the burden of the lost, and Gyges carried the burden of the shadow on his shoulders. But coming to the surface brought a glimmer of hope. The sunlight warmed their faces and reminded them that, beyond the darkness, the world still lived. Zarephina looked at the sky, holding her son in her arms, and she knew that their fate was not sealed. But in her heart there was fear. The curse was not defeated, only moved. And one day he would demand the full price. Chapter 24. The Fall of Morgath. The road through the forests of 𝕳𝖓𝖉𝖓 had been long and fraught with trials, but now, deep in the mist-shrouded mountains, the army of Gyges and Zarephina stood on the brink of their greatest confrontation, and in the distance, above the peaks, rose a black tower, a fortress built of rock and shadow, rising like a finger pointed at the gods. It was where Morgath held his altar of power. Gyges felt the curse burn in his chest, an unseen wound that reminded him with every step that the darkness was not only outside but within him. But this time he could not stop. If Morgath remained alive, neither Lydia nor Cimmeria would ever know peace. 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌 drew a circle of protection around the army. Blue flames danced at its edges, as 6 of the chosen ones, Thamyris with his lyre, 𝕳𝖎𝖓𝖌 with his giant axe, Myrto, 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌, Philias, and 𝕳𝖓𝖌 were preparing for what they knew would be the last battle. "Morgath draws his power from the shadows," said the wise man. "But the shadows fear the light and the truth. Remember, your every step must be united, otherwise it will feed on your weakness." Gyges shook Zarephina's hand, and she looked at him with moist eyes. "Don't forget," she whispered, "that you are not alone. Even if the curse burns you, our love is stronger than it." The fortress gate opened with a creak, as if Morgath himself had invited them to enter. The soldiers stepped inside, and darkness enveloped them. The torches were fading, the walls were full of witchcraft inscriptions, and shadows in the form of snakes were seeping from the walls, from the depths of the great hall. The voice of the sorcerer echoed. "You have come, at last, to offer your souls. I have the blood of King 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌 in my cups, and the curse flows through Gyges like an open wound. No one escapes fate." Morgath appeared at the top of a stone step, clad in a red-black cloak, his eyes sparkling like abyssal fire, and in his hand he held a staff of giant bone, from which black sparks rose. "Gyges," he said with a smile of cold cruelty, "you have always been a pawn. You wanted power, and the ring gave it to you. You wanted love, and the curse condemned you. Come now and embrace your fate." With a loud cry, Gyges raised his sword and rushed forward. The soldiers followed him, and the hall was filled with the sound of weapons and spells. Morgath raised his staff, and from it erupted shadows in the shape of wolves, which threw themselves at the army. 𝕳𝖎𝖓𝖌 cut one down with his axe, but others formed again, feeding on the darkness in the air. Thamyris sang on her lyre, and the golden notes illuminated the hall, melting some of the shadows. Myrto threw fiery spears, 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌 raised his shining shield, and Philias and 𝕳𝖓𝖌 cut their way through the walls of darkness. Gyges faced the Morgath. His sword struck the wizard's staff, black and golden sparks filling the room. Each blow was a duel between light and shadow, between the desire for life and the hunger for death. But with each moment, Gyges felt the curse in his chest whisper, "Give yourself over, moment of darkness, and you will be free." His hand on the sword trembled, and his vision blurred. Morgath laughed. "Do you feel it? It is my gift to you. There is no need to fight, Gyges. You are mine. Zarephina ran to him and shouted, "Do not listen to him! You are Gyges, the savior of Lydia, the father of Alyattes, my husband. You are not the slave of the shadows." Her words, full of fire, cut his invisible chains. Gyges roared, raised his sword and struck with all his might. The steel blade shone like the sun and cut Morgath's staff in two. The wizard let out a heartbreaking scream. Black flames enveloped him, his skin cracked, and his cloak tore into shreds. The hall shook, the walls shook, and the shadows began to melt in the air. 𝕬𝖓𝖉𝖉 shouted, "No! Hold him!" The 6 chosen ones approached, forming a circle of light around Morgath. Each spoke an incantation, and the floor vibrated. The wizard, caught in the middle, raised his arms and howled into the darkness. "You will not defeat me! Shadows do not die!" With a final cry, his body crumbled into a shower of ash and smoke. But in the next moment, the ash did not fall to the ground, but was drawn into a vortex of shadow, which gathered, twisted, and disappeared through the walls. Silence fell over the hall. Gyges fell to his knees, exhausted, clutching his chest. Zarephina supported him, but 𝕬𝖉𝖉's gaze remained dark. "This is not the end," he said. "His body was destroyed, but his spirit fled into the shadows. He will find another vessel, another form." The army burst into cheers, but they were cheers of bitter victory. They knew that Morgath had been overthrown, but not completely defeated. On the battlefield in front of the fortress, fires burned, and the wounded retreated. King 𝕬𝖉𝖉, still weak, watched as the people celebrated their victory. "You have banished the shadow for a while," he said. "But the price will be paid by those who remain." Gyges, heaving himself up, looked toward the horizon. Deep in his chest, the curse still smoldered, but for the moment he was master of it. "If Morgath returns, then I will face him again," he said. "As long as I breathe, he will have no power over us." Zarephina placed her hand on his and added, "You will not be alone. Together we have won, and together we will go on." Night descended on 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉. Torches lit the walls of the abandoned fortress, and the song of Thamyris rose, sad and solemn, for the lost. The army rested, but each knew in his heart that their victory was only a postponement. Morgath had fallen, but he had not died. The shadows carried his soul somewhere, hidden from their eyes, and one day he would return. But for now, for a moment, the light had won.